SaveWithConrad.com.
I'm Andy Cleveland from Appleton, Wisconsin. Longtime listener of the podcast. I listen to Something to Wrestle With, hearing all of the ads and things. We're at a spot where we wanted to refinance, and I know that's something that Conrad talks quite a bit about. We figured we'd give it a shot. I had a series of surgeries that were in a 15-month window, and it put us quite a bit with credit card debt. We had a lot of equity, over the years that built up in the house, so we wanted to take the equity out of the house and to pay off all those high interest credit card debts and get things back down to a manageable level per month. We worked with Larry and then Francis. It was awesome. Talking with Larry, everything was very helpful. Emails were fantastic, telling us what we needed to do. Francis was there to kind of nudge us along if we were dragging our feet a little bit. There's different forms and paperwork and things that you have to fill out. And anytime that we had a question, we would contact Frances by email, and she was just amazing. She helped us out, got those questions answered for us. You deal with other places they call, and you just feel like all they want to do is they just want to get the money, kind of take a piece of you. Working with Larry and Frances, it really felt they were helping us the whole way. They were very clear on what our intentions were and what we wanted, and they helped us meet our goals. So by doing this, much lower interest rate, everything is paid off, and now everything is so much more comfortable month to month. I'm Andy Cleveland from Appleton, Wisconsin, and I saved over $1,000 a month with SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender.
SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad, I'm doing fantastic. I can't believe I'm still taking Brother Love's spot, but here the hell I am.
I am so glad you're here too, man. You had a big weekend. I saw some clips of you in GCW. That looked like a cool setup, man. How was that?
Arrive, clothesline somebody, and leave. Yeah, I'm having a blast. I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life. And GCW, I really enjoy it. I don't watch a lot of wrestling just because I bet on sports, and so I watch other stuff. But GCW, I really enjoy the show. They had the show up in the mall. They had the certain area for the crowd. But then they had several stories of people. It was a terrific atmosphere. I've never seen business this hot across everything. Of course, when business got hot in the late 90s, I don't know how it was, in the independents. The independents were different then. But now business is just hot everywhere. It's really amazing for good groups. And I think GCW does a great job.
Well, I love that you're talking about how hot wrestling is, because this coming weekend, I can't believe this is real. Survivor Series is already here. I mean, this year has just flown by, and this year it's War Games, and we've got the Bloodline versus the Bloodline. It was revealed Friday night on SmackDown that Paul Heyman is back, thunderous pop. The fifth man for Roman Reigns' version of the Bloodline is CM Punk. Man, the crowd went bananas. This is kind of fun. I love the old school feel of War Games being on a main pay-per-view like this, and Survivor Series, man, that felt like a dead concept once upon a time, but they got it clicking on all cylinders right now, don't you think?
The crowd go banana.
Yeah.
Crowd go banana. Yeah, I think it does. Look, I was looking at some of the WWE stuff. It is so well done right now. It's really incredible what they're doing with the stories, and it's a separate issue. But when you talk about action versus drama and motion versus emotion, look at the difference. Not that you had to choose an either or, but what draws more money? Some kind of crazy, 5-star matches they would call it, or Roman Reigns calling the wise man and the phone being disconnected. That to me, and all of a sudden you create all this interest. I mean, the interest they've created with this is insane that you have a storyline this long. This thing has been year after year after year, and it's just as hot now as it was back then. It's one of the reasons Roman has headlined more WrestleManias than anybody in history. He's just that talented, but also you have great creative around him.
I'm really excited to see what they do. I love the idea of, as an old school fan, of War Games being on the big stage. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's coming up this coming weekend. So check it out. Survivor Series coming your way. Do you have a favorite Survivor Series moment, John?
I got counted out one time in Survivor Series at WrestleMania, not at WrestleMania, in Madison Square Garden. So I'm supposed to get a big push. And Tim White was the first time we got ear things in the referee's ear. And he's listening to somebody. I think Bob Holly had rolled me up. 1-2, I kick out. Tim counts 3. I'm supposed to go over. This is my big push. This is my big push. Madison Square Garden. And Tim looks up at me and goes, I'm so sorry, kid. He goes, you're out of here. And I come to the back, and Gerald Briscoe's waiting for me at gorilla position. And he goes, what are you doing? You're supposed to go over. And I'm not going to tell him that the referee counted wrong. They're not going to stooge Tim White. He's a legend. And so I said, well, I don't know, just a mistake. And then Jerry looks at the screen and sees me clearly kick out at 2. And he looks at me, he goes, what is Tim White doing? I have no idea. Tim comes back. He thinks I made honest mistake. Tim's a great guy. He's a legend. But back then he was. And he said, kid, I'm so sorry. And I said, Tim, not a big deal. Those things happen. I'll get a push sometimes later in my life if I don't get fired first. And he invited me out with Arnie that night. And so we went out and had drinks, and, Tim making up for counting me out in Survivor Series.
What a great story. Is that the only time you remember a finish like that happening with a referee?
Steve did it one time. I think Steve one time, I believe, got thrown over the top rope. I believe that's right. I remember Steve, and I remember Steve looking up at it where Rikishi or something and give him the dude, I just got eliminated by mistake. Signals. Like that's a signal. But yeah, I think Steve did it one time. I believe Stone Cold.
Man, I can't wait to see what happens this weekend at Survivor Series. Be sure to check it out on Peacock. And man, I'm excited about our topic today. We're talking about The Undertaker. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Bruce Prichard. Last week, we talked about Eddie Guerrero. And today, we're talking about The Undertaker. But before we do, I wanted to see what feedback you saw about our Eddie Guerrero episode last week.
Well, as mentioned, I blocked 800 people. I looked it up to make sure. And so I have all of the negative trolls and snowflakes blocked. So if you ever want to know, like if Elon Musk wants to find out where all the trolls are, I know all 17,800 of them. So all you got to do is come to my list and just banish them from like the planet. Send them to Mars, like on the first spaceship, because the world really doesn't need those people. And so I don't hear a lot of negative feedback because I've blocked everybody. So the feedback to me was 100% positive, which is awesome. But again, I blocked everybody. So I don't know if there's negative stuff out there, people calling me bad names.
Now, people are loving it, man. And we thank you for stepping in for Bruce Prichard. We're having a lot of fun. And I can't wait to talk about The Undertaker. But the story kind of starts before I even understood it. According to our research, you used a gimmick called the Death Mask in Tenroo's promotion. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Oh, I say the American Vampiro was the worst gimmick ever, and you got to find a picture to put that up of down in Mexico. This, I think, topped it. So I went down to Mexico. I won't go on the whole story. I was going down to Mark with Americano Vampiro Canadiens, the real Vampiro. He was that dude was over beyond belief down there. He had a rock band. He had a clone. He had commercials. It was unbelievable how popular he was back then, how over he was. Still is. I saw him just a few months ago down in Mexico. And so I went down as the heel vampire. It was a terrible gimmick. I get the break with Tenryu. And by the way, Tenryu and Kendo Nagasaki, that's kind of where the association came. Tenryu split from Inoki, and then Kendo Nagasaki split from Tenryu. And so that's how the formation started happening. I went to work for Kendo first, but Kendo and Tenryu were still friends. Mr. Sakurada were still friends. So I get booked now with Tenryu to go over there. And this was one of my first big breaks. I was so excited about going to Japan and working for a bigger organization, working for Tenryu. He's going to be during part of the junior heavyweight tournament, which Chris Jericho was a part of and did incredible work over there. But so I was going to be in with what they were considered the old guys, the Tenryus and Kim Duck was there. You had a bunch of these old guys that were legends around. I was just really cool. Then they tell me I'm in this horrible, shitty gimmick of Death Mask. I had no idea. I had agreed to go before they told me about the gimmick. And then all of a sudden they tell me now you're going to be this cowboy. He's like a character and he's got his hair down, his hat. I said, that's The Undertaker. I said, you're asking me to rip off The Undertaker. And they're going, oh, well, no, we're not. It's just kind of a cowboy gimmick, kind of a mortician, right? I said, guys, that's The Undertaker. And they told me finally, said, okay, we'll put you in this gimmick for a tour or two, and then we'll take you out of it. And so I'd already agreed to go, so I went ahead and went, and I thought, good Lord, I'll probably never go work for WWE now because I'm ripping off the freaking Undertaker.
I don't know why, but I find that fascinating because I didn't know that until we did research for today's episode. And I know that when you do finally get your opportunity to work with the company, the World Wrestling Federation, you're running through a lot of guys like Bob Holly, Hakushi, Fatu, even the young Scott D'Amore. But eventually, we see that you're going to get a big television opportunity, and it happens the Monday after WrestleMania 12, of course. And this is really probably the start of the Monday after WrestleMania becoming a thing. And as luck would have it, you find yourself in the main event against The Undertaker. And for the better part of the match, you're controlling the thing. And of course, we know that Mick Foley as Mankind makes his debut at the very end of that segment, and they start a pretty legendary feud. But to be in the main event with The Undertaker the night after WrestleMania, that's got to be a pretty big damn deal to you, right?
It was huge to me because I was sitting there at WrestleMania, and people get overwhelmed when they go to WWE. I'd worked in a lot of places, and I'd been fortunate to be on top in a lot of these places. But you get there, and you got 14 to 15 TV trucks. You got these huge arenas. You got Vince McMahon, who's this overwhelming character and person, and you get overwhelmed really easy. And then the day before WrestleMania, I was sitting there watching Sean rappel from the ceiling in the pond against Brett, had that 60-minute Iron Man match, and I remember literally thinking, I need to go back to Japan. I don't think I belong here. It was so overwhelming to see all that. And then the next day I show up and I'm with Undertaker. So it just added to the whole thing of, all right, this might be my last hurrah here. And plus the Undertaker had Diesel the day before, taking all those big stiff power bombs, those huge power bombs. Not that Diesel was stiff. He was not. But when you're coming from 7 foot down on a power bomb, it's hard not to take a pretty hard landing. And then he had Foley debuting at the end of my match, and he had Vader in a dark match after the show. So Taker had probably the worst weekend of his life as far as having to work with people. And then he had this big young kid, me, that was trying to get a job. He's like, oh my God, I'm really in trouble.
It's got to be a cool feeling to know that. I think this may have actually been your first live match on Raw, and it's the main event, and it's with one of the absolute top guys. What was your relationship like off camera with The Undertaker? I know eventually you guys become big pals, but had that already started by the time you're wrestling the night after WrestleMania in '96?
Yeah, there weren't separate dressing rooms back then. I mean, guys were just the guys, and I don't really know how it is now, so I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody, but I knew a lot of people that knew Taker because I started in Texas. So when I got there, I kind of had a relationship with him through other people. So I got along well with him from the very beginning. I don't know how close we were at the time. I will tell you this. When I was standing there, I told you I was overwhelmed, but I'm sitting there. And back in the day, you had the purple haze and you had little lighters come out, like the old Freebird concerts. Not the moonwalking Freebird Michael Hayes, but the Leonard Skinner. And you had the lighters come out, and the whole place would light up. And it's one of the coolest things you've ever seen. And especially when you're standing in the ring waiting for it. And I just seen all this stuff with Sean and Brett, and this whole thing's kind of overwhelming me. And I'm sitting there looking at all these lighters and this purple haze and Taker coming out. The place is going nuts. Day after WrestleMania. And I remember sitting there and I had all kinds of doubts, and Dutch Mantell is standing there next to me, and he looks up at me, and I think he can read on me what's going through my head. And he said, just be aggressive. Just be aggressive. Just be aggressive. So that's what's in my head. So right away when I take Taker into the corner, he put me over a big part of the match, which was terrific. That's what he does. He's the best for a reason. And I'm just waffling him with all these punches and kicks and all this stuff. And he goes, do I owe you money? I thought, oh, great. I'm fired now. And he was ribbing. He's just having fun. He's trying to get me to lighten up and have some fun.
I love to hear Undertaker stories because for years and years, he was one of the last guys who really tried to keep kayfabe in public. I mean, he'd wear all black and all that. Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. He was the guy. And he will go through, he will document that very well himself about what he did to go protect that gimmick. He was the Undertaker 24/7. I mean, he bought into it. And by the way, back then, Undertaker was the guy. He was the barometer for everybody. So this match with Undertaker, this was a test, 100% a test. This was not necessarily a push. It was a huge push, but it was also, I'm going to get canned if this is terrible. You're going to continue with Foley and Mankind and go on with your angle, so it's not going to matter that much. But back in the day, Taker was so good and so well respected that when a guy you wanted to see if he could do something, you bring him in just like I did, put him over a little bit, see if he's any good, see if he can get over. And if he can, then you stick him out there with Undertaker in a 2-segment match. And that was the barometer. And if you weren't any good, you knew it wasn't Taker's fault. So the guy would get fired. And if the guy was able to keep up with Taker, the guy had a job. But that was back then, that was the barometer for wrestlers that came in, was the Undertaker. He was that good and that well respected.
I don't know why, but just the visual of him asking, "Do you owe me money?" I mean,
he's a very funny guy. He's a very funny, nice guy. He's a very smart guy. And so when I had him in there, I didn't know all of his personality. I'd obviously sit in the back with him, and talk to him about sports and different stuff. But all of a sudden he says that to me, and literally I take a step back, and I can see he's ribbed. This is, I understand, this is during a live match, which is the biggest match of my career, because this is my whole future is based upon this match, and this is what he says to me. And he doesn't say to me to throw me off. He says it to me to relax and just relax and have some fun. And it worked.
It is fun to think about, though, because I think everybody listening to this knows that, at least from a fan perspective, Mr. Layfield is known for being stiff. And if you'd like to be known for being stiff, can I recommend BlueChew? BlueChew is an online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, and the best part is, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take them anytime, day or night, so plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. BlueChew wants men to be rock hard. That's what they told me. That's their mission. They won't stop until every man is bricked up like a brick house, until every tent is pitched, until every rod is raised. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our audience. Try BlueChew free. Just pay $5 shipping at checkout when you visit BlueChew.com. That's BlueChew.com to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring Something to Wrestle With. So, hey, man, once we get through that first match with The Undertaker live on Raw, you're not going to really be working with The Undertaker a lot, except for a few battle royals here and there, until the whole Acolyte thing comes to be. How does that happen? How do you find out, wait, I'm going to be in a faction with The Undertaker? Take us back there.
Yeah, but first I want to give you just a little bit of more insight into the match with Taker, because when I came back, Taker gave me the thumbs up, and I knew at that point, I had a job. That was, that's the old, Johnny Carson, wave you over to the couch, the comedian, if you did well, and if you don't, it's kind of unwritten, you won't be back. But when I came back, Taker gave me the thumbs up, and I knew that he would go to Vince and tell him the same thing, because that was, I knew that at that point that it was my future at least looked a little bit brighter from Deathmatch to that.
It's pretty phenomenal to think about that transition from being Deathmatch, sort of a spoof of The Undertaker, to you find yourself where you're working live the Monday after WrestleMania against The Undertaker. And before you know it, you're going to join this. Well, I mean, I guess before we get into that, what did you think of this darker version of The Undertaker, the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker? We had seen different iterations of the Undertaker character, but it certainly felt like it took a turn here, right?
Yeah, it did. And that was one of the reasons I was so worried about Deathmatch, was because I didn't want to do it. And they promised me it was the one thing. I thought, I'm going to get heat with Undertaker. Of course, he had never seen it, because it was something from first time he's going to see it. Maybe he's on this thing, but unless he saw it some other time. But the Undertaker character, it was so strong, and it constantly went through metamorphosis throughout his career. You look at how much he changed throughout. Nobody stays in the same character for 30 years and is successful to the level that Taker was for that entire time. Taker was on top from the moment he walked in the company to the last match he's ever had. I mean, that is one of the most incredible runs in the history of this business. But one of the reasons he was able to do that was because of the different iterations of the Undertaker character, where you almost stepped out of the Undertaker at one point completely for the American Badass. But during this point, he starts going to the darker side Undertaker, which, by the way, this is the most preposterous character ever. He knew it when he got pitched this. you're going to be a dead guy that's not really dead, that doesn't sell and can do crazy supernatural things. No one in the history of this business gets this character over except the Undertaker. This is an absolute preposterous character when you look at it, when it's just sitting there on the drawing board. I mean, when you get this guy come in that was Texas Red, and you've got this incredible athlete who was this preseason All-American basketball player. He's this huge guy. He's this really smart guy. This is the gimmick you give him. This is one of the worst gimmicks ever when you see it on the drawing board. When you see Undertaker do it, it becomes this Hall of Fame character that's one of the most iconic things that ever happened. You know, it goes back to Gary Hart saying to me, he used to say this to everybody, if they want you to be a clown, be a professional clown. Take the hand dealt and deal with it. You know, and Taker got this gimmick that was not that good and turned it into one of the greatest of all time.
I mean, I do believe that the Undertaker character, if it was used or performed by anyone else, it would have had a 18-month, 2-year run.
At best. Nobody would have bought this with the caskets, with the guy sitting up, with the supernatural stuff, with he's dead, he's not dead. No one would have bought it. I mean, no one would have bought it. I mean, this would have been a character. You saw some characters come along in WWE that didn't work. You saw some in WCW that didn't work, that were preposterous. This was the same mode. It just, you happen to have Mark Calaway behind it.
I want to talk about some of the silly things that the acolytes did. Like, one of the things that happened is, I think you guys were trying to sacrifice Midian. I mean, were there other?
Who want to sacrifice Midian?
The creative behind getting pitched that. This has got to be Ron Simmons receiving this information. Okay, today, guys, here's what we're going to do. Take us back to that.
Oh, my God. Ron used to come in. They used to come to me first. And I guess because they were scared of telling Ron stuff, so they'd tell me the story. That's true, by the way. They'd come to me. When we had to do a job, they'd come tell me first. They'd want me to break it to Ron. Like, Ron didn't care. Ron didn't care at all. But they didn't know that. And so they came to me first with this. But they came to me first with one time with Howard Finkel when they said we were going to basically pull the old deliverance scene on him. And I told Ron that, and I was, okay, yeah, how long we got? You know, it was, Ron didn't care. It was a work. And so when they told me the thing with Midian, they said, we're going to sacrifice Midian. I just started laughing. So when Ron came in, he goes, what are you doing? I said, we're sacrificing Midian. And Ron just, oh yeah, one segment. That was it. That's all he asked. It was one more preposterous thing that had happened.
Yeah, we sacrificed Midian. We're doing some special effects. The stage is going to explode. It sounds bad, and it was bad, but it crushed in the ratings. And that's what is interesting to me, is to see how well it does. I mean, Mankind versus Kane does a 5.93 rating. The return of The Undertaker here and the sacrifice that we're seeing here on YouTube at somethingtowrestle.com does a 5.83 rating. Like, I think it was a draw because nobody had ever seen anything like this in wrestling before, right?
No one had seen anything like it. And I think that it was so compelling. We had great characters, by the way. I mean, this is preposterous again, but we had great characters. Midian was really good at what he did. And, of course, The Undertaker, Paul Bearer, Ron Simmons, you got some great characters doing this stuff. And so when people are doing it, it's you get bought into this stuff. You know, it's like the cheesy horror movie that you buy into because you've got great characters playing the roles. And we had that. I believe this was the one where Midian was supposed to levitate, wasn't he? And then and didn't do it. And Michael Cole, it was one of the ones that we sacrificed somebody. And Midian, I believe, is this one where Midian was supposed to levitate, and they had some type of special effect, and it didn't work. But Michael Cole had not gotten the note that he wasn't levitating. Oh, God. And so Michael Cole says, "Oh, he's levitating," and Vince McMahon blew a gasket. Michael, you dumbass. We said, oh my God. Yeah. It was legendary meltdown by Vince when Michael Cole, because Michael not knowingly had made it look more preposterous, but he had been told that and nobody didn't tell him not to say it. And so Vince, that was one of Vince's epic meltdowns on Michael Cole.
Let's take a look at that picture of The Undertaker on that throne again, because I've known you to be a pretty practical guy. You know, John deals with the realities of the way things are. He's not going to spend a lot of time thinking about the way things ought to be. It's just, hey, here's how it is, and we move on. And I like that about you and your approach to life. But as I look at this photo here, I can't help but wonder what's going on in your mind. Like, once upon a time, I wanted to be Stan Hansen, clotheslining people to hell and back in Japan. I'd love to be battling Von Erich at the Sportatorium. And now here I am after a sacrifice with a man on a throne. And this is just one of the more interesting times in wrestling. And I know the way your brain works, it probably had to be like, I'm making a living doing this.
That's exactly what it was.
Good living.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was a great picture on the internet of me and Undertaker sitting on Saddam Hussein's throne over in Iraq. So it was a little bit more of a thing I thought was kind of cool. This was like, you have to understand, I grew up watching Texas wrestling. I grew up idolizing the Von Erichs, the kids, and then the Freebirds and the great stuff they were doing. Paul Bearer was a huge part of that.
Yes.
And so I'm sitting out there with Percy Pringle, Paul Bearer. I'm sitting out there with the first recognized black heavyweight champion in wrestling history. I'm sitting out there with the Undertaker, and I'm in a scene where we're sacrificing somebody. I don't give a damn what it is. We could be playing pickleball. Which wasn't even invented back then, but I don't care. I mean, I'm having the time of my life out there with guys these legendary figures, and I've got a job. You know, I'd been in Europe for 2 years, a wonderful, wonderful territory, but I was freezing in northern Germany in a trailer that didn't hardly have any heat. And now all of a sudden I'm standing on stage with these incredible legends. I know it's preposterous. I don't care. I'm having a blast, getting paid probably a lot more than what I'm worth, and out there with a bunch of legends.
One of the other people who's a part of the Ministry of Darkness is Viscera. And I've always found it interesting to hear why he was a part of the Ministry of Darkness. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, Viscera could work. I mean, could flat work. Viscera was a good guy, and he was a huge man. I mean, I don't know what Viscera actually weighed, maybe at 500 pounds. Viscera was a good dude and could work. I thought he fit perfectly into it because of his size. I mean, you can't coach size, you can't coach speed, as they say, you know, in so many athletics. And Viscera had all that. He had this incredible look. I mean, now he and Undertaker had kind of gone through it a little bit. There was a old back when, and I wasn't there, so I didn't see it. I'm telling you, you know what I heard. I got there in WWE right after it happened, where Viscera had hurt a couple guys, and Taker literally was waiting to go out, and he went from taping his wrist to taping his fist, as the guys in the dressing room would say, because he didn't want to break his hand hitting Viscera, because he was calling Viscera out for hurting somebody. And you know, Taker was the policeman too. You know, he took care of the boys, and so that went away. But sometimes when you have a conflict like that, you become closer to a guy, because Viscera was not meaning to hurt somebody. He was just big, and you know, he wasn't as strong as his size would suggest. And he hurt a couple guys. That got corrected. And when it did, I think Taker had a lot of respect for him, and Taker wanted to be a part.
I love hearing sort of the backstories of how all of this came to be. And I know that we're talking about the Undertaker today, but you couldn't tell the Undertaker story without talking about his backstage group of friends. And I know that one of his greatest, longest personal friends was the Godfather. Last week, we saw some pretty funny wedding pictures of Eddie Guerrero and yourself at your wedding. Can you tell us about the Godfather?
The Godfather and Undertaker were the original APA, and probably a better version of the APA. Those guys were legit, man. The stories about those guys are undertold. The true stories about those guys were ridiculous. The ability they had to consume anything, to mainly booze. I'm not trying to throw shade anywhere, but the amount of whiskey they would drink would have killed an elephant. And those guys would get up and work the next day. I mean, there are legendary stories about Undertaker carrying guys to their rooms. He did it with Bruce one time, and Bruce had a high tolerance. Godfather went out with some rap group from Jamaica one time that thought they could outsmoke him. He left them all passed out, literally like carcasses in a coma. These guys were legendary, big, tough, double tough guys who consumed monstrous amounts of alcohol and always showed up to work on time and would be the first one on the plane.
Wow.
He had an incredible group. You know, the BSK, back in the day, there's such BS going around about how much animosity there was in the draft. There wasn't animosity. We weren't getting paid back then. That's what the problem was. You had the clique with Sean and Kevin and Scott and those guys. You had the Canadian boys with Brett and Davey and all those guys, even though Davey wasn't Canadian, Canadian group, because Brett was kind of the head of that group. And then you had the BSK. But there wasn't cliques. Guys just hung out together. And because they hung out together, you put them, you said they were a clique, and they really weren't. You know, guys, a lot of times you had intermix of parties and people hanging out. So it was, a lot of that is overblown over time.
I do want to take a minute and talk about The Godfather a little more, but first I want to remind everybody about Lumen. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, meaning whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after your workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you the tips to keep you on top of your health game. Your metabolism is like your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health has a whole bunch of benefits, like easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health with each breath. You can use this to fuel your pre and post-workout fueling and get better performance and better recovery. This allows you to power through your toughest workouts and add on muscle mass. So if you're ready to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go right now to lumen.me/wrestle for 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/wrestle for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. And we thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's episode. So let's talk a little bit about The Godfather, because as I understand it, there's rumor and innuendo out there that once upon a time you were put to the test in East St. Louis. Do I have that right?
I was, yeah. I love Godfather, and I've loved him from the first moment I've met him. He's a wonderful human being, and you mentioned his wedding. Me and Ron showed up dressed as a couple pimps at his wedding, and we walked in late with canes and everything to interrupt the wedding. You know, and Godfather just almost fell over laughing when he saw us come in, because we interrupted the whole affair and had us in our whole pimp outfits that we'd found in Vegas. It was in Vegas, and Godfather and I were good friends. You know, almost right away. He's just a good dude. I'd known him from Europe when he came over, and I believe it was Ludwig Borger he slapped one night in a bar. He's a tough. Wow. I mean, you know, Ludwig's a tough guy, and Godfather. I don't know what happened, but Godfather didn't like it, and Godfather was right, by the way. So we're in East St. Louis, and you got to understand, you know, back in the day, the guys just went out every night, and so first of all, Savio had all the little guys, you know, and Hornswoggle likes being called a midget, and I know the correct term, I think, is dwarf, but so I don't want to call him anything because, you know, I don't know what the little guys. So Savio would bring all the little guys with him, and they would dress in a trench coat, and they'd be on each other's shoulders, and they'd look like it was one person. So you see a little bitty head on top of this trench coat, and they'd be on the shoulders of another little guy. And they come in so they'd pay one cover. Not that we paid any covers back then. Most of the time we didn't. And then they'd take the top coat off. There'd be two of them on top of each other. They'd run around everywhere. They were hilarious guys. So this is all going on at the same time. So you've got these little guys running all over everywhere. They were as fun as they could be. Just fun guys. You know, they really enjoyed. They played upon their little stature. They had some fun with it. And so it's probably late in the night, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And Godfather looks over at me and he says, "I think I can take you." And I said, "Take me where?" And he said, "Take you." He goes, "You're a tough guy." He goes, I think I can kick your ass. And I said, "Well, you might can. I don't know." I said, he's a super tough guy and big guy. And I had no doubt that he could. I don't know. I didn't know. And he said, "Well, let's step outside and find out." And I said, "Like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me." I said, "I really don't want to do this." And he said, "No, we need to step outside and find out." And I said, "All right." I said, "I will do it. I will go and I will fight. But I want you to know that this is not my idea, and I'm not in favor of this." Okay. It was me and Barry Windham there with Godfather and Taker. So finally, we go to walk outside. I thought, this big man really wants to fight me. And I'm like, oh, my God. And I knew it was a test. It was just a test. He thought he could beat me, and he probably could have. I had no idea. And I'm sitting there thinking, you got to be kidding me. I'm going to be in a fight at 1 o'clock in the morning in East St. Louis with Godfather in the parking lot. And I'm like, Walk outside, and as soon as I get out there, he grabs me and hugs me, and he goes, "I just wanted to see if you come out here." He goes, "You did. I love you." And I'm like, I'm like, no, I'm ready. Oh yeah, yeah. And so he stayed out there for so long because we started laughing about it. Then, he goes, "I just want to see who I was with." He goes, "I just want to test you." And I guess I passed. So now we're sitting out there just talking and laughing. Well, Taker is inside. He doesn't know if one of us is dead. He has no idea. We've been outside forever. Finally, you see him kind of come out, and as the Taker could only do, kind of open the door and just kind of look just to see if, and he sees us out there talking and laughing and realizes that nothing had happened.
I love hearing about the crew that you guys used to run with. Was Barry Windham ever involved in any of this?
Oh yeah, Barry was like Taker and Godfather. He had a tolerance that was just out of this world, absolutely out of this world. And he was a fun guy to be around. Guys loved Barry. Barry was maybe, I don't know about a little bit older, but Barry would have been NWA champ forever if he hadn't got hurt. And people knew how talented Barry Windham was. So he was kind of considered, even though he wasn't much older in age, he was kind of considered more of legendary status because of who he was and what he had done. So guys really loved to have him around. And Barry loved to go out. He loved to go out with the boys. He loved to have fun. I mean, Barry had a million freaking ribs. We'd drive down the road and Barry would get a newspaper and he cut a hole in it. And so he'd sit there on the passenger side. He had this newspaper up where obviously he couldn't see the windshield. But what he would do was he said, "Kid, act like you're asleep." So we'd pass guys going, literally 90 to 100 miles an hour. And I would have the chair back in the driver's side like I'm sound asleep. And Barry's driving with a hand that you can't see underneath the steering wheel. But he's got this newspaper up where you can't see. We drive by guys like that all the time. Guys would sit there and honk at us and try to get our attention and let us know we're about to die. We hit guys going down the road all the time. Barry's the one that showed me how to do that. We'd hit guys going 89 miles an hour down the road in the rental cars. And Barry's
wait. You just sort of glossed over that. You would hit guys?
Oh, yeah. Mark Henry tells a great story, 100% true. This was with Ron Simmons. Mark Henry passed us up in Canada one time up in near Halifax, and D'Lo Brown had gotten some chicken bones or something. I guess they'd been to like a KFC or something, or what do they had up there in the Maritimes, and threw these chicken bones out the car at it, just horsing around. Went all over our windshield, and Godfather goes, "No, he didn't." Ron goes, "Hit him." So we're going down the road at 80 or 90 miles an hour, and I'm hitting Mark Henry, and Mark's got the steering wheel, the world's strongest man. I think he's going to pull the steering wheel off. Taka Michinoku is in the back. D'Lo's doing his head. And when you're hitting a guy from behind, you can't stop because they'll push you. And so you got no control of your steering wheel. So they're having to go as fast as they'll go, but they have a governor on their car. So when their governor kicks in, I hit them. And so I did this for like 30 or 40 minutes going down the road. I used to do that all the time. Harley Race was notorious about it. My first time it happened to me was Greg Valentine. I knocked his tooth out in San Antonio with a clothesline. I just started wrestling. Johnny Valentine was there. His dad was there. And obviously didn't mean to. And I look up and I see a car behind me on, I think it's Highway 83 between San Antonio and Abilene. And I look up and I see this car just bearing down. I think it's a cop because it's got the lights on bright. And all of a sudden the car hits me. We're going like 80 or 90. We're flying. And the guys in the car with me are just start laughing. And I'm like, what just happened? And they keep hitting me. And they're tearing up the rent-a-car. And they go, "Oh, that's Greg." I said, "That doesn't explain what just happened. You told me who it was. You didn't tell me what's going on."
I don't know why, but this is my favorite segment in a long time because you just casually whipped out there, and I know someone's going to clip it. Man, when you're hitting the guy from behind, you can't stop. You can't. You have no control of the steering wheel. Barry Windham taught me that. Yeah. You hit a guy from behind, he's like his own glass. You can't stop. You can't get off the thing. You got no control of your steering wheel. So we used to get behind guys and we would push them, going really fast, and guys had no control. So it just, yeah. Probably not the safest thing, but we didn't have internet, so we were bored. A different time, to say the least. Piper would sideswipe a guy. I told guys don't ever mess with Piper. Some guys came in one day, and Piper just literally took his car and sideswiped the guy because they were messing with him and wrecked the whole cars. There was times in different rental car places they wouldn't let us rent anything.
because of what we had done. Because we would turn cars in. Barry Windham taught me how to turn a car in, turn it in wet, get it, especially if something was broken pretty bad, because you couldn't tell because it was wet, how many dents there were. So we used to figure out how we could turn cars in without having to pay the insurance.
My God, that's hilarious. I mean, do you remember there being a time where the office, the agents, anybody came to you guys? Maybe there was a meeting or an informal reprimand. Stop fucking with the rental cars, or you can't use Hertz anymore. We got to start using Enterprise. Does that type of conversation happen?
No, it never did. I mean, it just kind of was assumed that was what was going on. I tell you, there's a great story. Remember that, that great photo in Europe with everybody sitting around in the back of the bus? Yeah. Well, I was there that day, and I was on that tour, and I knew a lot of people in Germany. I hate it wasn't in the picture, because I guess I knew a lot of people that in Germany. I go out every night, so I don't know. I hate I wasn't in the picture, but one of the things that happened on the day or two before was, all the guys back in the day would love to smiz a little bit, and so George Steele was a guy that we were a little worried about would tell on us, because most agents would not, and Jack Lanza wouldn't, Gerald Brisco wouldn't. They would handle things internally if it was a problem, but they wouldn't go to Vince with it. So everybody was in the back of the bus this time. This was out a day before that famous picture. And everybody had their weed, and like 90% of the guys smoked. Me and Ron were the 10% that didn't. Not that we were against it, we just didn't like it. We like to drink, and so all the guys are sitting back there. And Undertaker, he was always cool hand Luke. Everybody looked to Taker for advice and everything. Taker goes, nobody hit one. And so anyway, George Steele comes back, and so finally Taker says, all right, nobody hit it unless George Steele hits it. And so finally he comes back there, and I don't know if it was Taker or X-Pac or whoever it was, offered one to George Steele, and George looked at it and he goes, oh, I haven't done that in so many years. He goes, maybe I'll just try one little puff. And he goes to puff it up, and look, a Cheech and Chong concert. There was like 18 different things lit up at the same time because George had done it.
My God, what a great story. Hey, you mentioned that photo from the back of the bus, and I'm sure Silva's going to put that in. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Any idea who took that photo?
Rocky.
Okay.
I believe Rocky took it. I think that's what Gerald Brisco told me. I believe. Now, I'm not sure about that. Please don't, the internet will correct me on that. I'm sure they will. They love correcting me.
Well, hang on now. Scott Hall's in that, so it couldn't have been Rocky.
The Rock.
Yeah, but I'm saying he was gone. Like Scott Hall.
Oh, gotcha. So it wasn't. Gerald Brisco told me one time he thought it was The Rock that took the picture. Obviously,
that would have made sense with the exception of Scott Hall, because Scott
Rocky
Hall
wasn't there then. That's right. Rocky hadn't come in yet.
Yes.
You know what? I don't know who took it. I guess, and I'm not trying to throw my friend Gerald Brisco in the bus. I guess conflated a story because he was trying to figure out one day who took it, and he was wondering if it was The Rock, and that's where I got that from. So obviously, I'm dead wrong. I don't know who took it.
But maybe Brisco had been a part of the Cheech and Chong concert himself.
There's no doubt that he was. He's talking about a man with tolerance.
Let's talk about the APA and how it becomes a part of the Ministry of Darkness. You're going to get the Brood involved as well, and we got some silly sacrifices, and that is something I wanted to ask you about, like the whole crucifixion, which we weren't supposed to say, of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And it wasn't a cross, it was a symbol. That was a big controversy at the time. What did you think about that? Was that as controversial as maybe people think it was?
I don't think so. I think there was some pushback. We had pushback from everybody. Our ratings were huge. The thing about it is when your ratings are terrible, nobody cares.
That's right.
You can do whatever you want. When the ratings are good, everybody comes after you. And so that was more of what it was than necessarily the content. The content was way over the edge. There's no doubt about it. But so was content everywhere else on TV. And I remember doing it, and I don't remember getting that much negative feedback. Vince was very particular about calling it a symbol, not a cross. He was very upset, concerned about upsetting the religious right because they were going after our sponsors. That's why I brought David Keckner in for a while, the comedian, played the weatherman, to go after the parent-teacher council, and that's when they backed off, was when we're attacking them, and they couldn't take that. They could take them attacking us, but they couldn't take us attacking them. And so, to me, I don't think it was that controversial. I don't know how great the angle was, the storyline was. I don't know if anybody bought we're going to sacrifice Stone Cold or not, but as far as the controversy, I don't remember it being that strong.
I do want to ask you a little bit about the higher power reveal. there's been a lot of speculation through the years that when Vince McMahon took that cloak off and it was me, damn it, that didn't really make any sense at the time, and it certainly doesn't now. But there was speculation that, hey, maybe it was going to be Christopher Daniels or maybe it was going to be Jake Roberts. So there's all these rumors that were online at the time. Do you remember there ever being any sort of discussion with you guys about who the higher power was going to be?
No, I don't remember. And I heard the Jake Roberts rumor, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I heard it back then. So there obviously was some veracity to it. And I don't know if they ever talked to Jake or not about it, but I did hear that back then. So I feel like there's some truth to that. But I agree with you. I mean, Vince was already the higher power. He was already evil Mr. McMahon. He owned the company. Everybody already knew it. So you're saying, hey, here's the guy who owned the company. By the way, he's also the guy that owns the company. I thought it didn't work. I don't know who you possibly could have come up with during that time that would have been bigger than the storyline. I mean, you had Stone Cold out there, who was the hottest draw in the history of wrestling at the time. You had Undertaker out there, this foundation of the company, and you had all these other characters with it that were huge. To find a guy like that that's free, I don't know. I don't know who it could have possibly been. Do you have any thoughts about who it could have been?
I mean, there's speculation that it was supposed to be Christopher Daniels, but someone on the inside felt like he didn't meet the size requirements to be the leader of the group at the time. I don't know if that's true or not.
I never heard that, so I don't know. But it could be true, but I never heard that at the time.
When the thing starts to fizzle out, the higher power, the crucifixion, just the ministry of darkness, when we phase it out and we're going to transition, were you disappointed or were you happy that, hey, they put me, I'm still with Ron, right? So it can't be that bad.
Yeah, I'm with Ron Simmons, and I was ecstatic. They put us into something, and we got those symbols from the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, and nobody really understood it. They didn't really explain who the acolytes were and who we were acolytes for. I guess we're acolytes for Taker at that time, so it made a little more sense to go with him. But I didn't know then where we would go. I thought being with Ron was a great place to be. I see there you got a picture of me there with the tag team titles. I guess we'd already been champions once. And so, we had done pretty well. And I've got something that's pretty cool. I've got a guy that I want to be a partner with in Ron Simmons. And so to me, it wasn't that big a deal that, all things end. And I don't even remember the definitive end. We just kind of phased out.
I do want to talk about what's next for you and the Undertaker. I think the next time, once the whole Ministry of Darkness thing is over, you wind up working a memorial show. I think it's a Yokozuna memorial show. You're working against the Undertaker. What was that like?
You gotta understand, Taker's one of those guys that it's hard to explain how good he is. I've said this about Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels as well. And it is. It's, how do you define greatness with words? And how would you define Jordan, back in the same time frame, back in the 90s? That's who Taker was. And being out there with him was so much fun because he literally would feel the crowd. You when you say you go out there with nothing planned, you don't. But you go out there with maybe 2 or 3 different ideas in your head about what you might want to do. It's the most accurate thing is like 2 ad-lib comedians going out there and feeling what they want. And you could watch the wheels turning. It was so fun to be out there with him because I learned so much from just watching the wheels turning in his head. He would sit there and wrestle with you and he'd be calling spots, but while at the same time you could tell he's listening to the crowd about what they're buying and what they're not buying. And the whole match would change. The whole match, people wouldn't notice it, but I certainly would because I could tell the thinking of what he's doing, but where we're going progression wise. And all of a sudden it would change completely and you go complete different direction and the crowd would buy it. He had an incredible knack to be out there, and being out there with him was always different because of that. And it was really a cool experience. From the very first time I was out there with him in the very first Raw to the last time, it was always the same.
When you're taking yourself back to being in the ring with Undertaker, do you remember, is there one thing you learned from him that you carried with you the rest of your career as far as being in the ring with him? Like, oh, I don't want to forget that because I'm going to use that in the future.
As far as movesets or as far as just psychology?
Working the crowd, timing, working with the referee, working the hard cam, just as a big man, is there anything you picked up where you're like, oh, I'm going to borrow that?
I'll tell you one thing I greatly appreciated and I loved about him, and it's something I did pick up from him, but it wasn't being in the ring with him. It was watching him in the ring. You watch him when he has an opponent that's not very good, and he'll work with the referee. He'll work with the timekeeper. He'll find a way to make the match good without having to work with whoever's across from him. And I got that from him. You know, I picked that up, and thank goodness when I was out there with him, he never had to work the referee, or at least he did it to keep my self-confidence intact. But you watch him, he figures out ways to make things work.
Did he have a favorite referee as far as you know?
He loved Earl. I mean, he loved Earl. Baby Earl was always his guy. I mean, you got to understand, Earl was a salty dude. I mean, a salty dude. Earl would fight a fan to protect you. And I don't mean fight a fan just because he wants to fight a fan. Earl would protect you. And Earl was a really smart guy. And so I think, I can't speak for him, but I think Earl Hebner would be the guy that he would like.
Well, I know who you like, and that's our friends at DraftKings. If you're looking for a best way to win huge prizes during one of the best NFL weeks of the year, well, look no further than DraftKings. They're the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, and this Thanksgiving, you can play free for a $1 million top prize. That's right. Any customer, new or existing, can play free for the $1 million top prize with their next $5 deposit. Make it a really happy Thanksgiving with DraftKings. All customers download the DraftKings app and use the code STW. That's code STW to play free for a shot at the $1 million top prize. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in New York. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccp.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit required. Reward issued as a $5 ticket for November. 28 fantasy football millionaire contest. See DraftKings.com/DFS for details. John, you've had some fun with DraftKings through the year. You got any favorites this Thanksgiving? What are you looking at?
I love DraftKings. The Cowboys are just absolutely horrendous. You know, they can't stop the run. If you can't stop the run, you can't stop anything, because that's the basics of an offense. If you can't stop the pass, you can figure out ways to mitigate that. You know, that's what the Giants did with Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. If you're able to hit the quarterback, you can stop the fact that you have a deficiency of your defensive backs or your corners. You can't do it if you can't stop the run. And that's the problem with the Cowboys right now. I mean, they're just god awful. But I love Detroit. I love Detroit at home, and I love betting on Mahomes as an underdog, which he's going to be now that they've lost a game.
Check it out. It's happening on DraftKings. Be sure to use that code STW. Hey, so I wanted to mention, once the Undertaker, or once the whole Ministry of Darkness thing is done, we see a real about face for the Undertaker. We had seen the original version with Brother Love. That was a heel character who's just running through people. Then we saw the beloved babyface Undertaker, and really the only variations were like, is he wearing blue glove or purple gloves or gray gloves? But then with this whole recreation at Survivor Series 96, he has the dark teardrop, and eventually we get the Ministry of Darkness version. But once the Ministry of Darkness is no more, and he is away for an injury, I think he misses like 8 months. Yeah. He comes back as the American Badass. He's totally reinvented himself. What did you think of that presentation? And how do you think the real life Mark Calaway felt about this pitch, if you will?
I could not have loved it anymore. Him and Godfather are bikers. They love riding bikes. Midian famously wrecked his bike on the day he was going to sell it. You talk about sacrificing Midian. It was probably because Midian wrecked his bike on the day he had it sold. Midian took it out for like a little spin and wrecked his bike. And just, you got to hear Midian tell the story. He's almost in tears because of what he did. But Taker was a biker. I mean, this is Undertaker. He was good friends with Chuck Cito, the former president of Hell's Angels. And, a lot of times we'd have the Angels, some of the boys come around. Chuck always come around. Wonderful guy. And Taker knew all these guys. This was very normal to him. And also, you got to remember, during the time that we're doing this, you had all kinds of crazy characters when I came in 95. And those characters all went away. Well, one of the craziest that actually worked was The Undertaker. And now you're getting to this reality-based thing, mainly because of Stone Cold and DX that we're getting into. I think it was a natural progression. I think it was also a very good progression. I mean, you had the Kid Rock song had just come out at just the same time. I mean, that American Badass was over, man. When he came out as American Badass, it was so different. But it was him also. You know, he didn't have to buy into it. This was him. And I thought it worked tremendously. And it shows you how smart he is, but having to go from one character to different iterations to a complete different character. Then you see him come back to that character later.
It is fascinating to think about the evolution of that character and just how over it was on night one. I mean, I think they were in Kentucky when he makes that return. I think it's Judgment Day 2000 on pay-per-view, just off the top of my head. And man, he clears house and the crowd could not be more into it. Did you think that this was a risk for him at the time? Like, what if it didn't work?
Yeah, I did think it was a risk because you had this character that, I thought it would work. Now, I wasn't privy to it beforehand, about what the creative was. But if you'd asked me, was this going to work? I would say unequivocally, hell yes, I think this is going to work because this is who he is. This is actually Mark Calaway is the American Badass. I mean, that's him. He's cool and Luke, man. That's Mark Calaway. Look at what Undertaker has done also. I told him after his Hall of Fame speech, we gave that incredible speech, for about 45 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes, whatever it was. I thought I could have gone 4 hours. It was so good. I told him afterwards, I said, that's one of the bravest things I've ever seen. And I said, because you stepped completely out of character to do that Hall of Fame speech. No one had ever seen that. If you got 3 sentences in and people weren't buying it, you were screwed and you would have had to just shut the program down and leave. I said, that was one of the bravest things I ever did. He's very confident in his abilities. And he told me that in response, he said, you're one of the only guys ever has said that to me. He goes, that's the one thing I was concerned about because it was so different. And he's a brave guy. And you look at guys that make it to the top. You look at Stone Cold. You look at The Rock when he played Get Shorty. I mean, everybody told him not to do that.
Yeah.
They said, stick with the action figure, be the modern day Stallone or be the modern day Schwarzenegger. He's the biggest freaking star in the world right now. And one of the reasons is because he stepped out of his comfort zone. You look at everybody else, Edge to Cena to the guys that make it big are willing to step outside their comfort zone. And Taker was willing to do that at the Hall of Fame. It was incredible. That was a bigger leap to me than the American Badass because I thought that was more like him. But it was a leap.
Let's talk a little bit about Undertaker behind the scenes. We as wrestling fans have heard forever and ever that he was what was known as a locker room leader. And I saw someone else, not to use a gimmick, but they said, hey, he was sort of like the Godfather of WWE. I don't mean the Godfather character. I mean like the mafioso boss. I mean, he is the guy. And I want to know, have you seen instances of him being the locker room leader? And well, now might be a fine time to mention that I think he was involved in something called Wrestler's Court.
You think? Yeah. You think? He was the freaking judge. We called him the hanging judge because he was always hungover.
Okay. So tell us about him being the locker room leader and what can you tell us about how the Wrestler's Court sort of came to be?
I don't care who it was at the time. This isn't just the freaking fluff piece for Undertaker, but it sounds like it, but I don't care who it was at the time. And there were some great legends from Bret Hart to Hogan coming back to Warrior being there to incredible presences like Sid and you name it. We've had it. He was 100% always the guy that people went to 100% of the time. If people had a problem, they go, well, I'm going to talk to Taker. I mean, literally, like he could fix anything. He was the guy. That's why he was the head of Wrestler's Court. It wasn't just because he was the biggest name. He was the most respected by far. By far, he was the most respected guy. People would they want to get Taker's approval. They wanted to find out Taker's thought on something. Our spot on the bus, there's always the Andre spot in the back, because Andre needed the bigger seat. That was Taker's spot out of respect. Yoko got it after Andre because of size. But then when Yoko was gone, that was always Undertaker's spot. Nobody touched it. It wasn't like he asked for it. He didn't ask for it. That was given to him by the boys out of respect.
Well, I know that I think, in my opinion, Wrestler's Court has been misrepresented online. I mean, you were a big part of these. Would you agree with that? I mean, it does feel like Wrestler's Court, based on the stories I've heard, by and large, it was supposed to be fun, but somehow the wrestling community has decided this was this terrible thing.
Yeah, these guys are a bunch of snowflakes and guys that weren't there making judgments, about stuff that they weren't a part of, or about fans. I'm not talking about the boys. The boys can have their opinion. But it was fun. Guys would look forward to this for weeks. We didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. Cell phones were just starting to come in, but their cost was outrageous. If you're trying to, depend on who you're wanting to call and your plan, we had to entertain ourselves. And so Wrestler's Court was one of the most fun things we did. They say that Dutch Mantell started. Nobody has disputed that, so I'm sure that's correct. But Taker was always the judge, and it was the most fun thing. So you'd want to sue somebody over something, like when we sued Teddy Long over selling free Viagra to the boys, mainly Viscera. When we wanted to sue somebody, guys would get lawyers, guys would bribe off people, guys would get witnesses that were going to lie on the stand on purpose because it was entertaining. And then we'd have this Wrestler's Court, and the whole freaking company would come. We had a Wrestler's Court in Nashville. Vince let the people out of the production meeting because they needed to go to Wrestler's Court.
Oh my God.
So they shut down. We're on a TV show, a global TV show during these huge ratings era. Vince shut down the whole company so we could have Wrestler's Court. It was that much fun. Guys would come in, the place would be packed. You'd have all kinds of outrageous accusations. You'd have defense attorneys. You'd have some of the most creative guys in the world coming up on weeks to entertain the guys. Because the biggest thing we said was, you can lie, you can mislead, we don't care, just be entertaining. And that was the whole thing with Wrestler's Court, was be entertaining.
Well, and now feels like just as good of a time as any to announce that next week, right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield, we'll have a brand new segment on the program. Check it out.
What you are about to witness is a shoot, brother. When conflict takes place between the boys, pertaining to anything from an in-ring incident to locker room dust-ups, from the hotels to the airports, backstage politics, even to catering, from an unpaid debt to a prank gone wrong. When the heat gets too hot, it will need to be cooled down, and the workers agree to drop their claims and have their disputes settled in our forum, the Wrestler's Court.
So how about it, Mr. Layfield? Next week, right here on SomethingToWrestle.com, Wrestler's Court. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, the one time that Undertaker wasn't there, Triple H filled in, and that's when we had Mae Young, and she was talking about the boys Teddy Long selling the free Niagara, as she kept calling it to the boys. She had no idea what it even was, and some of her comments, which I will tell next week, not safe for work, but some of the funniest comments you've ever heard. We sued Dustin one time because me and Barry Windham were out with him, and he had got a shot of whiskey, and he had a little too much to drink, so he poured it out, and we caught him. So we took him to court. I think we're in Champaign, Illinois, and got to understand, you take a guy to court, it's not because you don't like him. You're not going to take a guy to court you don't like. You're going to take a guy to court you like because you want to have fun.
Yeah.
And Dustin at one point was getting barraged by all of this stuff that we're saying about him, and he goes, man, fuck this court. And Taker goes, get him! The whole court dogpiled Dustin. And that was the end of the court.
I love it. I love it. Listen, if you're going to be subject to Wrestler's Court, you're probably going to be having a few adult beverages. And I would recommend, if you get brought up on charges in 2024, you start with Zbiotics. It's a game-changing product that I use before a night out with drinks. It's called pre-alcohol. Let's face it, we don't bounce back the next day like we used to after a night out with drinks. So we're forced to make an adult decision. Do we have a great night or do we have a great next day? You don't have to decide anymore thanks to Zbiotics. Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Every time I have pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on getting up and recording one of these podcasts at 8 a.m. in the morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, all because I knew I had Zbiotics there. And I kept hearing about pre-alcohol. I wondered what it was really like, but now that I've tried it, I get what everyone was talking about. And with their GMO technology, Zbiotics is continuing to invent probiotics that will help with everyday challenges of modern living. Go right now to zbiotics.com/wrestle to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Wrestle at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/wrestle and use the code WRESTLE at checkout, and you'll get 15% off. Hey, so I know that when we think about great big men through history, we always list The Undertaker. But the big man who maybe created the mold for all future attractions in wrestling was Andre the Giant. And he was known for traveling around in, well, rather custom arrangements, if you will. He would have like a big Andre chair in his van. And as the rumor and innuendo goes, there was an Andre chair on a bus. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Andre chair on the bus for always in the back, and people after Andre got it out of respect or because of size. So in the back of a bus, like in Japan, Stan Hansen had that seat when I was there out of respect. You have this one seat that's in the back that faces the aisle. So there's plenty of leg room right in front of you. So you'd always save that for Andre. People called it the Andre chair. And, when he traveled with Tim White, he had to get a special Andre chair in the van. That was a separate thing, but in the bus, it was always an Andre chair. Well, after Andre was gone, out of respect or size, guys would designate who that chair went to. And the guy had nothing to do with it, by the way. So Taker sitting in that chair had nothing to do with Taker saying, I'm going to take that chair. It was the boys saying, Taker, hey, that chair's for you. Please sit in it for us. And it was out of respect. So Taker always had that chair in the back of the middle of the bus. Before him, it was Yokozuna because of size. He'd always sit in that chair. But when we travel internationally, we'd have to be on buses together. That middle seat was always a seat of honor because it was the most comfortable seat. And that's who you gave to somebody that the boys thought was very special. So like Stan Hansen got it when I was in Japan working for Baba over there. Undertaker was always the guy that had that Undertaker chair.
I do want to ask you, when you start working with Undertaker again after the whole American Badass thing, it's fresh off of you becoming the WWE champion. You've beaten Eddie Guerrero, which we talked about last week here on the program, and the Undertaker is chosen to be your first opponent. Is that his request, your request? Is that just where creative landed and you guys are both tickled, or what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, you have to understand during the time, but back in the day, one reason Undertaker and I worked so much was because he had to close every show. So he was the biggest name and he was the biggest draw. And that now during the time with Stone Cold, you can argue who the bigger draw is. Steve was probably the biggest draw of all time during that. But Taker, for all those years, was the biggest draw in the company. So on a live event or like at a TV show, we didn't always put the main event on last. Sometimes because of TV and programming, you might have it on first, you might have it on the crossover segment. To keep the fans there, they always advertise Undertaker. So he always had to wrestle extra. Some of these guys talk about they don't want to wrestle twice now. Taker did it every freaking night and sometimes more than twice. But he would always wrestle that last match because you want to keep the crowd there. So during this run that I had as JBL, I would work with Taker every single night after TV, especially. That's where all that's where all of the ha-ha came in. But after Eddie Guerrero, there wasn't, where do you go? You got this character that it was so hot from an angle because of Eddie Guerrero that it's hard to follow up with that. And so Undertaker, I think, was naturally the next person for JBL to face. And, plus we had this long history. I think Vince knew that Taker could help JBL. He knew Eddie could help JBL. He knew Taker could help JBL. And I think that was as much a part of it as anything as compared to just having good matches.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, when this angle really gets kicked off, it involves you having a little person come out dressed like the Undertaker. And just looking at the visual at somethingtowrestle.com, this tickles me. How much fun were you and the Deadman having with this? My God.
We had so much fun. we just laughed backstage. All of the creative team laughed backstage. We wanted to have fun. And I was a guy that was constantly 24/7 wanted to have fun and make people laugh. I enjoyed the ha much more than I enjoyed the serious, heat stuff, because everybody does. The ha is the fun stuff, and when I got to do the ha with Undertaker, because you can't get heat on him. He's dead. What are you going to do? Kill him?
Right.
So you can't get heat on him. So to me, the thing that always made sense was the ha. And so when you had the little guy out there, I mean, it was just, I just loved it. I thought it was so funny when I tried to throw the little guy to him and he didn't even budge, and the little guy just fell. It was just, it's so preposterous that there I am about to tombstone the little guy.
God, what a great visual.
Oh my God, I loved it. And he'd always come out. There's my look always when he'd come out. Teddy Long put me in more one-on-one matches with The Undertaker, and he'd always appear behind me. Oh my God, he was like my nemesis the whole time. It's like, okay, how are you going to watch John die today? Because it was always, I always died. I always got killed. And it was, but how he did it was always different. So people like, so we're going to see JBL die again today.
Let's talk about SummerSlam. You guys are building, of course, towards a big SummerSlam collision with this story, and it's going to pay off. SummerSlam 2004 is what we're talking about. Most people remember that for Randy Orton winning the title, but you and Undertaker were put in a pretty tough position where he's trying some submission moves in this era. He's trying to not just do the tombstone, and you guys are having a good match, but it seems like the fans wanted some more chaos and violence. They're chanting Spanish table and all kinds of other stuff. And somehow Heidenreich gets involved in the mix. What can you tell us about your SummerSlam match with the Undertaker?
That's where I went through the limousine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're in Toronto, and Toronto is just different. I love them. You got to love going to places like that. Philadelphia was like that. Certain places were just crazy, and you had no idea what was going to happen because the fans truly have a mind of their own. And, sometimes they want to help the show. Sometimes they want to be the show. Sometimes they want to just be part of the show. I think it's awesome. Thank God they care. They had booed Edge that day. I mean, the Hogan Rock match, that you'd had at SummerSlam up there was, obviously you have a switch, which, by the way, Rocky freaking genius for not turning heel because of the crowd was global. Terrific insight into Rocky's mind at that point. But it was I thought it was the Toronto crowd. Not saying the match, if the match wasn't any good, say the match wasn't any, I don't know. I thought that we had a good match, but the Toronto crowd was wanting to have some fun, and God bless them. I'm glad they paid tickets, and I'm glad they came to have fun. And if they're being involved in our match or trying to sabotage our match or just trying to be their own show, I could care less. I'm glad they're having fun.
I love the choke slam through the limousine. I know they showed it on replay. Maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe that exposed a little bit of the magic. But is that a Richie Posner special whenever you're going to be gimmicking a limousine?
Yeah, I think it was Richie, and maybe been Ellis as well. And I'm not sure about who had more insight into that. I think it may have been Ellis. I don't want to misspeak. I have so many guys when they do podcasts make up history, and I'm trying not to make up history. I don't know. I think Ellis is the one that built it. So Taker, and Bruce has said this, Taker was willing to put me over clean. And I told WWE, I said, if you do that, I'm dead. I'm absolutely dead. I said, you can't go forward with me. I said, because if I tell everybody I'm going to beat the Undertaker and then I beat the Undertaker, I'm not a heel anymore. I'm a badass. And I said, you got a problem with what you're going to do with me. And so I said, there's no way that I would want to agree to that. And so they said, well, what do you have in mind? And I told him, I said, I'd love for Undertaker to beat me so badly and choke slam me through my own limousine and leave the show that way, and me brag for the next 6 months that I beat the Undertaker 101. There's nothing he could do about it. Be a heel in what I was doing as far as winning. And so that's what we decided to go with. But the problem we had was during the match, I can't remember if I was out first or second, but I remember seeing the fan run across the top of the car. And if you know the story, their fan got drunk and ran across the top of the car and didn't fall through.
Oh.
And so I'm in the ring. I see this. And so I'm in the ring or coming. I can't remember which one I was. I know the fan ran across the top of the car. Did not fall through. So all I can think is they got the wrong car because there were 2 cars backstage.
Oh,
The fan didn't fall through. So I'm sitting there looking at the car. I'm going like, oh, you got to be kidding me. They've got the wrong car. There's no way the fan didn't fall through. It's supposed to be like paper mache. Like when you saw me go through it, that was, that's what it was. It was nothing. It was a crash pad in the middle of the car. And so I'm sitting there with the match. All of a sudden we start. I realize in 30 minutes I'm going to get hurt and get hurt probably pretty bad. And there's nothing I can do about it. I can't tell the referee. I can't tell Taker. I'm not going to tell Taker because he wouldn't have done it.
right.
No way he would have done it if he thought that was the wrong car. He'd have figured out something else. He's a smart guy. He'd have figured out a different finish when he'd gone back and told Vince what happened. So I'm not going to tell anybody. So for 30 minutes, I think I'm going to die at the end of this match. And he gets me up at the top of the car, gives me the freaking Google, choke slams me through. I go right through it just like I'm supposed to, and I hit on crash pad. I'm absolutely fine. And thank God they couldn't see my face because I was so freaking happy that I'm not in the hospital. And I got to the back. I told people about it. They didn't believe me. And so they found a wide camera angle from somewhere in the stadium, and they found a video of the fan running across the car. And they said,
Oh, wow.
well, why didn't he fall through? And no one could explain it. Nobody could figure out why the fan didn't fall through. His foot went through. There was a little bit of a tear or something, but nothing else. And nobody could figure out why. But for 30 minutes, I'm sitting there thinking at the end of this thing, I'm going to die.
Man, the stress and anxiety you had to have during that.
I had to wrestle 30 minutes like that and thinking at the end of this, I'm going to get hurt probably pretty bad. And I just thought, you know what? I hope it's not as bad as I think it's going to be.
It wound up being a DQ finish. So you win because, of course, you hit Undertaker with the belt, but the ref didn't see it. But when he comes to, now the Undertaker's got the belt, you're left laying. So here you go. Nick Patrick calls for the bell, and that's it. But the post-match angle with the choke slam through and all of that, I guess this was debated in the newsletters that there was originally an idea that Heidenreich would get involved. And we haven't spent a lot of time talking about Heidenreich here on Something to Wrestle, but Bruce has sort of tongue-in-cheek laughed about the fact that the Undertaker would take umbrage with how many questionable opponents Bruce would book him against, whether it was the Giant Gonzalez or the Great Khali in a prison match. And I mean, there's a lot of really bad stuff through the years that he had to suffer through. But Heidenreich is one we have not spent any time talking about.
Yeah.
Any fun Heidenreich stories you can share with us?
Do I ever? So we're in Orlando and Taker's working, and I can't remember who he's working with, Kurt Angle or who he's working with. For some reason, I think Orlando was out there. I can't remember why. Maybe he was like Intercontinental Champion at the time or something. So Heidenreich was missing the show. And look, I love Heidenreich. I don't want to tell anything bad about him because he's a good guy. I really did like Heidenreich. He was a good guy. Everybody liked him, but he's missing the show. So Heidenreich calls, I believe Arn Anderson was the agent, and Heidenreich is a bit emotional because he's having a tough time getting the show or something has happened. So Taker's about to go to the ring, and he tells me, he said, I think it was Arn was the agent. He said, Arn's got to watch the match. He goes, you watch the back door. And he said, you talk to Heidenreich when he comes in. Now, if he's in an emotional state, that's okay. He said, send him to the ring for the finish. And he said, if he's not, you come. And we're going to put you in a casket and send you off. And I said, oh, my God. So now I'm freaking Carl Jung. I'm freaking a psychiatrist. I'm like, what? I'm not trained to do this. I mean, you need Sigmund Freud for this. I'm going to figure out his emotional state. So I'm sitting back there by the back door. I'm waiting on Heidenreich. Here he comes. And Heidenreich and I had a great relationship. And he comes up and he goes, hey, man, I'm sorry I'm late. He knows I'm waiting for him at the door. And I said, okay. And I said, all right. So I'm sitting there looking at him, trying to figure out his emotional state as I've been told to do. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm literally just looking at a guy trying to figure out, is he okay to go there? I have no idea I'm not qualified for this shit. So I'm sitting there looking at him. And I said, he goes, what am I doing? I said, well, I'm not sure. And I'm still just kind of looking at him, trying to figure out what's your emotional state, because that's what I've been told to do. And so I said, well, I'm not sure. He goes, man, I'm sorry. I had some problems getting here and I was just late. I said, okay, all right. So I'm about to tell him what to do in the match. And I said, okay, here's what you're doing. And then when I say that, he goes, I'm just sorry. And he starts getting very emotional and crying. I'm like, and I go, okay, you're not going to the ring. You're staying here. Thank God that just happened. So he goes, no, I got to go. I said, no, I'm going to take all the heat for this. I'm making the decision. I'm telling you to stay here. Okay. So just stay here. And I said, I'm going to go to the ring and go get put in the casket. So I come out the ring at the end of the thing. Taker's in the ring. He didn't know any of this is going on. And so I come out to the ring, try to interfere in the match or something. They put me in freaking Orlando, of course, in like a 69 position in the casket to be and me one way and Orlando the other, and they close it and we can't get out because the damn thing's locked because they rib you every time you get stuck in one of those things. And I'm stuck in there with Orlando Jordan, And so Taker, when I first come out and I go to jump, he goes, "Not in a good state." I said, "Nope, be glad I'm here, pal."
My goodness. I don't know that we would call Heidenreich a true classic wrestler, but man, true classic is going to come through for you this holiday season. I'm a big believer in this, and what I mean is, as a guy, we all have our favorite pair of sweatpants, joggers, hoodies, T-shirts, whatever our favorite outfit is, our favorite like comfort clothes. Man, we'll wear them until they're just threadbare. You know what I mean? And then we get the evil eye at the lunch table with our wife or something. But the reality is, when you find something that fits you good, man, we're just guys. We can't help it. We want to go for comfort. True Classic helps you check all those boxes, but now they make it available in 3, 6, and even 9 packs. We're talking best-selling T-shirts, hoodies, jeans, and more. We're really talking about premium products at an affordable price. That's what True Classic is all about. Shirts that define your best features with a perfect fit. We're talking snug in the arms and chest with just the right amount of room in the midsection, and they've got you just in time for the fall and winter for all your must-haves. The long-sleeve Henleys, the waffle hoodies, the jeans, the button-ups, the joggers, and more. They've even got you covered when it comes to active wear. They got moisture wicking, quick dry, and odor control. You can expect all of this from True Classic. This allows you to mix and match clothing to work with your lifestyle. Nothing super trendy. We're talking about stuff that will look good in pictures 30 years from now because it just never goes out of style. That's why guys love it. They also have a 100% perfect fit guarantee and easy returns. If it's not a perfect fit, it's an easy return. That's why they're trusted by more than 4 million customers. And check this out. What an incredible note this is. True Classic has more than 200,000 reviews. When was the last time you were even moved to go leave an online review? It's happened for these cats more than 200,000 times. The holidays are here, and True Classic's ultra comfortable, perfect fitting essentials make for the perfect gift for both you and the men in your life. So if you're ready to upgrade your closet, shop now and unlock big savings during their huge holiday sale. Just go to our exclusive link at trueclassic.com/STW to save. That's trueclassic.com/STW. Please support our show and tell them we sent you, and end the year with holiday cheer thanks to True Classic. So this thing with Heidenreich does actually happen at the following pay-per-view. So when we're talking about No Mercy, it's going to be a rematch. It's a last ride match, which I guess is like a hearse match with you and The Undertaker. You're going to get the win. And this is the era where The Undertaker is still trying to use some different finishes. When he started to use more of an MMA influence, doing triangles and go-go platas and all of that, that's different from what we've seen with The Undertaker. He's always been the choke slam and tombstone guy. It feels like we had conditioned fans for that. I don't know that the submissions really ever got over the way Undertaker hoped. I was a huge UFC fan at the time, so I totally got it and I was into it. But it felt like the fans, man, they came to see the hits, right? They want the choke slam. They want the tombstone. You were a part of this. What did you think of him trying some MMA stuff?
I think they've worked now. I think he was ahead of his time. And
yes,
I think that what he did was appropriate. I mean, the thing about it is, you look at a guy like Chris Jericho, who's always reinvented himself from his finish to everything else he's done. That's the only way you're going to have longevity. The only way. There's no other way. You can't go out there and just do the same stuff every single night. I know fans want to see it, but like Springsteen, when you go to see Springsteen, you want to see Born to Run. You want to see his biggest hits, but he's also going to give you some new stuff with it. Otherwise, it's just the same old thing, even though you respect the old stuff. And so Taker was always at the cutting edge. He was at the cutting edge with American Badass. When he came out there, he was, he spotted the trend with Kid Rock and the patriotic fervor that came with, especially after 9/11. He spotted this MMA wave. Now everybody's doing it. he was ahead. And sometimes the guys, as they say, and Mr. Brisco hates this because it has Native Americans in it, but the pioneers get arrows and the settlers get land. Sometimes the first guys are the ones that take the flack from it, and pave the way for the guys that come after.
We see at the end of this match is when Heidenreich jumps out of the back of the hearse, so that he is next for the Undertaker. And it's also revealed in a pre-tape that it's Paul Heyman driving the hearse. And there was speculation in the newsletters that for whatever reason, the Undertaker and Paul Heyman had heat going back to when Paul Heyman was the head writer. Someone having Paul Heyman heat is not necessarily new to the wrestling business. What can you tell us about the Undertaker and Paul Heyman?
A lot of guys, Heyman's in a position of power, and he was in a position of trying to put, duct tape and baling wire on a company together to try to make a living. And when you're in that position, that comes with heat, and that comes with a lot of heat. Bruce is one of the nicest guys I know, and he has a lot of heat with people because of his position. So I think a lot of that came because of Paul Heyman's position. You disagree with something, but they're the boss, and they have to figure out a way to do it. You don't really like it. Very few guys are like Vince. There's nobody like Vince that can come up with something that you disagree with, and by the time you leave the room, you've thought it's the greatest idea ever. Most guys, when you leave the room, you're just mad at them.
Let's talk about somebody who was rightfully mad, I'm sure. The Undertaker had a pretty scary incident that we saw once upon a time with the pyro. And I don't know that everybody noticed it right away, but on replay, boy, this is a scary thing. What can you tell us about the day that he's just standing right on the stage and now he's engulfed in flames? I mean, this is a worst case scenario situation, is it not?
This is like being on the Jamaican track team trainer and blowing up Usain Bolt.
Oh,
blow up anybody else. Blow up your guy that throws the shot put. Blow up your guy that does the pole vault that only does 16 feet. Don't blow up freaking Usain Bolt. Not that you want to blow up anybody, but you talk about a tough son of a bitch. Now, Taker almost got his head blown off. It blew up his eyebrows, and he didn't freaking blink. And his face is on fire. I mean, he's literally trying to put out his face. He's got his face. He doesn't know how bad he's hurt. I mean, this is what he did for freaking 30 freaking years. So he gets up there to the pyro. They've got the pyro on the wrong pole. When he does the hands up, the pyro is right there in front of him. It almost blows his freaking head off. I mean, it could have killed him. I mean, it's insane how stupid this was. You can't make that mistake. You can't put live pyro in the one place that anybody, much less your star of the company, is going to be. I mean, this guy, what a freaking bozo. So it happened. Needless to say, when Taker came back, that guy had been fired already and never was seen again. They told him to get out of there. I think Taker might have killed him. I mean, which I don't blame him.
Is that one of the more scary moments you remember seeing in wrestling? Like to see one of your friends engulfed in flames like that? I mean, this is just worst case scenario. No,
because it happened like that. I saw Gangrel one time get a base. I don't know if he got second or third degree burns. They brought him up that chute. They do. Remember the brood entrance, and they were going to have flames coming up. Well, they did it in rehearsal, and the flames created a vacuum. And when it did, it literally caught Gangrel on fire. We saw it. When he came up, I mean, they were bringing him up slowly. He's cooking. I mean, he's on fire, and the flames that got on him. It was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Now, that being said, the only reason Taker wasn't because it happened like that. Because once you saw it, you're like, oh my God. With Gangrel, we saw it and it was continuing. We're like, somebody get him out of there. That guy's going to die.
Speaking of scary stuff, I know we like to have fun on the program, but I think you and Undertaker were both in the building the night that Owen had the accident. What can you tell us about that night with regard to the Undertaker?
Yeah, I dressed right beside Owen at least part of the day. I never got called into the lawsuit. So obviously, maybe I wasn't with him later in the day when he discussed it. I was there when I don't want to get into, the specifics of, of the harness and everything, but I did, anyway, it was, I was not brought in, never testified anything, but when Owen fell, when he brought him back, you knew he was bless his heart. He was gone when he brought him. And I don't know if he was technically dead at that point, but he was turning color. He was gone. And I believe it was Taker and Steve was the last match, I believe.
I know it was Taker because I was so distraught. That's the reason I don't remember who it was. I remember thinking, oh my God, I've got to. Taker and them were in there talking over their match. They didn't know what had happened. They didn't have a monitor in there. And so I'm the one that went in and told Taker, and I believe it was Steve, that Owen had just passed, and I assumed he'd passed. I didn't know if, for sure if that was, he'd been pronounced dead, but you could tell that bless his heart, that wonderful man wasn't going to make it. And I went and told Steve and Taker, I said, guys, it's an absolute tragedy. I said, I want you guys to know that Owen just fell from the ceiling and he's not going to make it. And, oh man, I hadn't talked about this in a long time. And actually I've never talked about it. And Taker looked at me and there was just, shock. Shock. What do you do? This is your friend and you're in catering with him, and all of a sudden, he's gone, and he was gone. And death is so, it's so final, and I know I'm overstating that, but it's just, it's something that you don't get back. And those guys immediately just got up and went out to see what happened. And, that's when, backstage, no one knew what to do. No one knew what to do. People talk about, what you should do in hindsight. I saw Vince and I saw Jerry Brisco who were making the decisions. And to this day, I would have done probably what they did. I agreed. I believe I was on after this. And they said, you don't have to wrestle. No one had to wrestle. You can do whatever you want. Vince didn't know what to do. Yeah. And Jerry Brisco took over and said, guys, you can do whatever you want. But if you want to wrestle, we think it's the best thing to do to go through the show. And, history, has judged both sides of it as both being wrong. So I don't know which was the correct thing to do, but I thought I should go out there and Taker and Brett were last. Not Taker and Steve, I believe it was last. And so they ended up, having the match, but I was the one that went there, unfortunately, and had to tell them. And, man, you talk about a horrible thing to have to tell somebody.
Thank you for sharing that story. I can tell, man, I didn't mean for the show to take a hard left like that.
Good grief. Good grief. People love, oh, he got emotional. That's the greatest thing ever. No, it's not, because I hate doing that.
Well, we appreciate you being you and telling the story, because I think everybody listening to this knows, even if they didn't grow up an Owen Hart fan, they know what a respected and beloved figure he was in professional wrestling. And I know that decision has been debated forever, but one of the things that I guess I never really thought about, but I learned this year, maybe I learned it before, but it really clicked for me this year. A lot of the fans in the arena, they didn't really know what had happened. The lights were down. So at no point during the show did they know that Owen had really passed away. And,
yeah, and I've never talked to Vince about it. I've obviously talked to Gerald Brisco about it a lot over the years. But if that had happened in front of everybody, I think that the show would have been canceled. I don't have any doubt. It would have been canceled. But I think because of the fact that you brought him back, I don't know. I don't know at that point when they brought him back, we saw him. He was turning color already. He was gone. Whether he was gone officially or not, whether he still had a little beat in his heart or still a little brainwave back there, I don't know, but he was gone. Yeah. And so I don't know if they thought there was a chance that he might make it or not. I have no idea what their thinking was at that time. But since it didn't happen in front of their fans, I was there. I had the option of wrestling, had the option of not. They were wonderful about that. They didn't make anybody do anything. They gave us the option. I saw Vince with tears in his eyes. He was heartbroken over it. And so was Gerald Brisco. So everybody, we didn't know what to do. And we thought the right thing was to go on and do the show because the fans, anyway, I have no idea the right thing to do to this day. And that's what we chose.
Yeah, I appreciate
I'm not going to disagree with Gerald Brisco. I've told him before, I agree with him. And if I was him and I was there backstage when he made the decision, that I would have done the exact same thing. Now, whether that's the right thing later or not, I would have done the exact same thing that Gerald Brisco did at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I know, it sounds like we're defending Vince or defending the company, but the reality is it's not like you can lean on a best practice here. There's no rule book, there's no guidance. This is a horrible tragedy that nobody knows exactly what to do, but
the people that are arguing this weren't backstage and saw what happened.
Yeah.
Backstage, I saw Vince with tears in his eyes. He was heartbroken. He couldn't even talk. He loved Owen. He was absolutely heartbroken. Gerald Brisco was one of the ones that kind of took over and did a lot of the stuff backstage. Now, Vince made the ultimate decision, but he gave the power to Jerry to do it. And Jerry was the one that dealt with all of it. Vince had no idea what to do. The same thing, with the whole Benoit thing, which is a separate kind of, tragedy. But Vince didn't know what to do. There's no template for this stuff. There's no, here's what you do in case something tragic happens. Now there may be, but there wasn't then.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. You mentioned, we're talking about tragedies. I guess we'll get this one out of the way.
What a downer this show is taking. Holy shit, we were doing so well, and then Dave Silva screwed up a freaking commercial, and nobody's going to know that because you're going to edit it because Dave's the editor. But ever since that shit happened, the whole show's gone downhill.
Well, listen, we are going to get back on track with some funny stuff. But you mentioned, another tragedy, another name, Chris Benoit. And our show, of course, is about The Undertaker. Do you know what The Undertaker felt about the Chris Benoit stuff or how it happened? How do you guys receive that news? Because that too feels unfathomable at the time.
Yeah, it was. And we knew something was bad wrong. Sometimes you just have a feeling, and I don't believe in necessarily feelings and stuff like that, but you've been around long enough. I remember the time when we were in St. Louis and driving to Kansas City, and Brian Pillman had no showed the event. I'd seen him the night before, and he acted just a little bit strange, but he wasn't messed up. It was just, something just seemed different, And I remember when he didn't make it, I thought, I think something bad has happened, and that's what we thought with Chris. Chris never missed shows. I mean, Chris would go to Mars to not miss a show. He'd figure out a way to get there. And for him not to be there, we knew something had happened. And then Vince made the announcement to the entire company at ringside that day that his wife and his boy had all died, and Chris had died. That all of them had died, and we didn't know any specifics. And so the place was obviously in shock. And Chris was a very beloved figure. I mean, people loved Chris. Everybody did. I mean, he was a very beloved. I have no idea what happened. And what snapped, what changed, but Chris was a very loved figure, and so was his family. So it was a huge shock to the WWE family that this had happened. And when they said it, I was sitting there thinking, and I thought, man, this just seems crazy. And I started thinking, boy, I hate talking about this shit. I started thinking, what if Chris did it? And so who do you go to? You go to Taker. Taker was the guy. Taker was the guy that always had the right thing to say, and Taker was the guy that always knew what to do. And so I went to Taker, and I won't say who was with him because I don't want to bring up any bad memories for people because of the reaction. It was a very sad reaction. But I went to Taker, and I said, hey, I need to talk to you. And he said, what? And I said, what if Chris did it? And he just looked at me, and you could tell that the wheels were spinning. And he said, we need to talk to Vince. And I said, yeah, we do. And so as we go to Vince, Steve was the biggest name in maybe wrestling history at the time, and still is. And he grabbed Steve and said, Steve, come with us. We got to talk to Vince. So me and Stone Cold and Taker went into Vince's office, and late in the day, too late to change the show, no, it wasn't. I don't know what it was. Late in the day. Trying to tell history just as it happened without any prejudice. And Taker said, John, tell Vince what you just said to me. I said, Vince, what if Chris did it? And I said, we're about to do a tribute show for a guy that could have done a horrific thing if that is a possibility. And Vince looked at me, and I've never seen a man that was so decisive, so indecisive in my life. I've never seen Vince like that, and I don't know if he had thought about it before. I can't read his mind. I have no idea. He didn't give anything away, as he never does. And he said, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just telling you that there's a chance that something horrific has happened here, and it could have been different from what we think." And he said, "What do you want me to do?" And literally, he was not confronting me. He didn't know what to do. He had no idea what to do. I mean, none. I don't know if he had thought about it before, but, Vince is a quick mind. And he said, "John, I don't know what to do." And for Vince to say that may be the only time in his life he ever said that. And he said, "I don't know what to do." And I said, "Vince, we could be doing a tribute for a guy that did a horrific thing." And I said, "I don't know." I said, "That's the downside risk." And he said, "John, I think we have to go with what information we have now. And if it changes, we'll change." And I said, "Vince, I don't have a solution. I just have a potential problem." And I said, "I don't know the answer." And Taker spoke and Steve spoke and said, their piece. I can't remember what all they said, so I'm not going to try to repeat it because I don't remember. It was a pretty dramatic moment to sit there and think that your friend could be this horrific murderer, and that there's even a possibility of that, because that wasn't brought up at that time. And so I'm sitting there telling Vince this could be a possibility. And I don't know if he thought about it before, but he literally asked for help. He said, "Well, you tell me what you think we should do." I said, "Vince, I don't know. I'm just telling you the downside. And I'm telling you what could have happened." I said, "This looks like something that could have been different from what everybody's thinking." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Do I go with the available information?" And I said, it's his company. I'm not, I'm not going to be, bold enough to tell him what to do. And I said, I think that's all we can do. I said, "I'm just telling you that I think there's this chance." And man, Vince I've never seen him like that. He had no idea. He was indecisive, not indecisive. He was mulling everything over in his head. You could see the wheels going at 5 million miles an hour in his head about what are the possibilities. What should we do? And I'm putting my thoughts in his head. Should we cancel the show? Should we not do it? Should we do a different show? What should we do? And eventually we were sat there, us four in the room, and Vince made the decision, not us. I don't want to, give us any, I'm not trying to take the heat off of us, but that wasn't our position. And so Vince said, "I think we go with the available information." And he said, "That's all we can go on, John." And he said, "We have to go what we know. We can't go on what we don't know." And I said, I agree with that. And I said, "I'm just brought something up." And so we all just kind of walked out in a freaking state of shock.
The Benoit day and the Owen day, are those the two toughest days in the history of WWE from your perspective, like your career with WWE?
Yeah, definitely, because that happened right in front of us. Obviously the Chris Benoit deal was something else, but the information unfolded right in front of us. The Owen deal happened, right in front of us. So yeah, not any doubt. I've been there 30-something years. Those were by far the two hardest days to deal with, and it's because they unfolded right in front of us. There's been tragedies. There's been people that die. That didn't happen in front of us, and that didn't happen. The information that we're getting as we're sitting there in the WWE, and you're having to make a decision about a show that you're going to do. I was doing commentary, so I've got to talk about this. So, this is as I'm sitting there doing commentary, right before the third hour, we get the news that Chris had done it, and I'm like, "Oh my God, what do we do? What do we do now?" But it wasn't. I don't believe, and Taz was there too, and Michael Cole was there too. Maybe they remember exactly. It may have been they thought Chris did it. Maybe it may not have been 100% sure. I don't remember that, but I just remember thinking, "Oh my God, what in the world do we do now?" It's just it was an absolute state of people being perplexed, not knowing what to do.
I do find it interesting. Of course, our topic today is the Undertaker. That when you weren't sure what to do, you went to the Undertaker.
Always.
And the Undertaker took that problem straight to Vince McMahon. It just goes to show you, about their relationship. You could see the reverence that the Undertaker had for Vince McMahon. How would you characterize their relationship?
It was closer than a father-son. It was one of the closest relationships I've ever seen. I've never seen Vince love anybody like he loved. Now, I'm not throwing shade at Shane, by the way, so don't people say this. a performer, somebody that's not in his family, like he did Undertaker. He loved Undertaker. And you got to understand one of the reasons why. For one, he was one of the biggest professionals in the history of this business. But Taker had to carry the ball when times were good and when times were bad. When times were bad, nobody wanted the ball.
Right.
No one. That's in any territory in history. Vince would call Taker out of, getting done with the surgery going, by the way, I need you for the next 6 months. Business was bad and he had to break glass and call emergency and bring Undertaker back. So Vince relied on Undertaker to a degree that he never relied, I don't think, on anybody else for more years. Hunter was very much like that, by the way. Hunter was a guy that had to carry the ball when times were bad too. But Taker, a little bit longer. And, obviously with the streak and all that stuff and all of his surgeries, I mean, that guy, there's a reason Vince McMahon loved that guy.
Well, I know that you loved Eddie Guerrero. We talked about him last week, and we also talked about the bloodbath that you guys had. And I know that, you sort of alluded to it last week. You're laying on the table, supposed to be getting stitched up, and here comes the Undertaker.
Yeah, this scar I've got in my head right here, wherever it is, you can kind of see it there. It's right in my finger, right there. I had juice, but also Eddie hit me with a cowbell, so I don't know which it was a cowbell or the blade that got me, but it could have been Eddie. But I'm bleeding pretty bad. I need some stitches, so I go back to the back. We got a great doctor. He's a wonderful guy, and I'm sitting there and I'm going to get sewed up in the back. When we first got doctors get sewed up in the back, it was great because you didn't have to go to the hospital. Way back in the day, you had to go to the hospital. That just sucked. Go to a freaking hospital emergency room on Friday night in Chicago. I mean, it's like a freaking war zone when you get busted open, which I had to do one time. So it was so wonderful to have a doctor there. So I'm back there getting sewed up, like I had done a million times. If I ever go bald, I look like a baseball. I've had so many stitches in my head. One day I was sitting there, working with Taker, and his knee brace had cut me open, and I go to get sewed up, and he goes, "You already been sewed up?" I said, "That was from yesterday." So it just happened. It happened all the time. So I'm sitting there and I'm getting sewn up. And Taker had that match where they buried Paul Bearer and in the concrete that was so freaking terrible. And he's back there and he's telling a story. And it's one of these Undertaker stories. He's a great storyteller. And everybody's sitting there just listening to him and laughing. And I'm getting sewed up at the time. And the doctor is like this. And he's sitting there and he's watching, and he's listening to Taker. He's like, ha, 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 yeah. And he's just laughing. And he's sewing me up at the same time. By the time he got done, the stitches weren't even tight. They had loops in them like a shoelace. Larry Hack, the trainer, goes, "That's the worst stitch job I've ever seen. That's why I've got scars, because of the freaking Undertaker and his bullshit story."
Well, it's no bullshit story over at Mando. I got to tell you, this is a game changer for guys, especially during football season. It's time for tailgates, touchdowns, and Sunday cookouts with the crew. And now you don't need to get stressed out about getting sweaty when it's 3rd and long and the game's on the line. MVP is Mando. That's right. It's clinically proven to control odor for 72 hours. It's perfect for long days at the game or at the bar, and it's safe for the whole body, and I mean the whole body. Your pits, your package, your feet, and everywhere in between. Yes, everywhere. It comes in 3 different formats, too. You've got invisible spray, solid stick, and invisible cream. But how about this? 4 different cologne quality scents, too. Bourbon leather, Pro Sport, Clover Woods, and Mount Fuji. Not Mr. Fuji. This is no rib. It was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was just being misdiagnosed and mistreated. And Mando's whole body deodorant, man, it's the toughest body odor. That's what it's made for. But it's gentle enough to use everywhere because it's aluminum free, it's baking soda free, it's cruelty free, it's dye free, and it's going to make you stink free. Mando's starter pick is perfect for new customers. So be sure to secure some last minute stocking stuffers, if you will. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, the cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice. I like the mini body wash and the deodorant wipes. You'll even get free shipping. Now, luckily, we got a discount code to get you hooked up on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get a $5 off when they go with our starter pack with our exclusive code. That's like 40% off your starter pack. Use the code STW at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. It's shopmando.com, and our code is STW. Don't let BO keep you on the bench. Smell better naked with Mando. Hey, speaking of things that stink, the opposite of that was the Undertaker's match at WrestleMania 25. A lot of people still hold it in the highest of regards and say it might be the best WrestleMania match of all time, and that is a high watermark. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker in Texas, WrestleMania 25. You got any stories about that one?
Yeah, I do. The greatest match I ever saw was Finlay versus St. Clair. Up until that point, I saw them in Europe one time, and I remember watching, going, they're doing a sport that I'm not playing. I just thought this is something I don't understand. And when I saw that with Shawn, I was retiring that night, and I was kind of heartbroken because I was having to retire. You know, I didn't want to retire. I retired because of injuries, and I had the 23-second match with Rey Mysterio, which is about all I could do. I could barely get to the ring. You know, my injuries were bad, and I made it to Texas. You know, that's all the gas I had left in the tank was to make it to Texas when you had, I think the Von Erichs went in the Hall of Fame. I thought, man, this is a perfect send off. I'm down here in the WrestleMania, Texas. And I didn't want to watch the end of the show. I just wanted to drive home. I was really heartbroken about having to retire, and it was, you know, just felt sad. You know, all my life I'd wanted to be a wrestler, and I'd been a wrestler, and I'd got to do this wonderful stuff and work with these wonderful people, and it had just ended, and I knew it had ended. And you know, and it's not what do you do now? It's you've taken the one thing I want to do my whole life away from me, and now I got to go home. And so I remember just getting my bag and thinking, I'm just going to quietly leave. I'm not going to say bye to anybody. I don't want to, you know, people hug me. And, you know, Vince did, of course, you know, just told me, thank you for everything, you know, which almost made me break down, you know, because I thought so much of him. And I knew it was over. And I remember walking by the monitor before I leave. And I remember Shawn and Taker were getting in the ring. And I kind of knew the backstory a little bit. You know, they were going to put on a show. And I knew it. You know, kind of got those rumblings that these two guys, they're about to do something dramatic. And I remember watching that match, and I just remember thinking from the first time I saw Finlay and St. Clair wrestle that this is a sport I don't understand. This is something I don't play. This is a level that I'm not at. And I remember just watching that thing. That's the greatest match I've ever seen. And I thought, what a great time to retire, because I've seen now the greatest match in wrestling history. And I remember just going home, and I wasn't really, it was kind of cool. I wasn't that sad anymore. I remember thinking, I just watched the greatest match in wrestling history. I thought, it was that good. It's unbelievable. And don't forget, Shawn Michaels had more athleticism in 95. Mm-hmm. So did Taker, by the way. I mean, those guys had gone through surgeries, through back issues. Those guys were beat up and older at the time. And those guys did that. That's one of the most remarkable things. I'm so glad that all the circumstances around it, that I sat there and watched that show at the monitor. And once that thing came out once they finished, I just grabbed my bag, smiled, and walked out, and realized I was done with wrestling.
Man, what a great story. We're not done with you, though. I want to do a few more Undertaker stories before we put a button on this one. There's a pretty legendary story that's gone around about the Public Enemy's cup of coffee in the WWE. We've all heard about their match against you, but what did the Undertaker, did he have any interaction with the Public Enemy? I mean, he's the locker room leader. What can you tell us about Undertaker and those guys?
We were sitting there, and you got to understand, back in the day, these guys got, you know, not like, you know, Cena had, and, you know, not like Cody Rhodes had, but these guys had obligations that were really tough to be there. And so even Stone Cold, The Rock, those guys would show up at 1 o'clock. You know, Undertaker always was there on time, you know, unless you had an appearance or something. They always showed up at 1 o'clock when the rest of the boys did. They were no different from the rest of the boys. They made that very clear. So I'm sitting there with Undertaker, as I did a lot during catering, and Public Enemy, we were working with them that night. They're not there. They walked in at 5:30 in the afternoon that day. And Undertaker just looks at him. Me and Ron are sitting there, and he goes, I will be damned. He said, there's lunch, boys. And you could tell he was hot. I mean, hot. The disrespect those guys show to come to a new company and come in late like that. Now, Ron and I had no intention of going out there, and, you know, we were going to work stiff, but, you know, we weren't going to beat anybody up. We weren't going to do anything. None of that until they changed the finish right before the match, which, you know, I've talked about a ton of times. But we kind of had that edge from about 5:30 when they walked in with their bags. They walked in like they owned the place. I mean, they walked in like, hey, we're above everything. And they just walked in through everybody. I mean, most guys, when you come in late, would sneak in. They walked in like they're on the parade. And Taker, it did not set well with the Deadman.
I like that. There's lunch. I know you said you've told it, the story 1,000 times, but can you do it one more time for us?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So anyway, we go meet with Terry Taylor, and they were Terry's boys. And, Terry, they were going to set up, I believe, a tables match, first tables match maybe ever. Sean was the first one to go through a table with Diesel when they used Mad Dog's leg, I believe, in the pay-per-view years ago. And they're going to set up a tables match. And we may have been going to do the job. Me and Ron didn't care. It was a work. So we're sitting there and they're going over the finish. We did all the stuff, and I don't even remember what the finish was. I think that we put them through a table was the finish, but I don't remember how we got there. We're going to have a normal match. And we go up to Gorilla. It's me and Ron, Public Enemy, and Gerald Brisco were the only ones there. It was not a Raw or a SmackDown, so it was a pre-show. And a lot of times while the pre-show is going on, that film the weekend shows, they're busy rewriting the show or they're busy doing last-minute pre-tape. So a lot of times there's no action. Most people don't even watch those matches, because of that work that's going on. And literally as their music's playing now, one of them turns to me and says, hey, we don't want to do that spot with the table. And I said, that's the finish. And they said, yeah, we don't want to do it. And I said, cool. And they walked to the ring, and Ron's sitting there, and Ron's taping his wrist, and he said, what was that about? I said, they don't want to go through the table. He said, then we'll take the table to them. And so Gerald Brisco stands up. He goes, what the hell just happened? And I said, don't know. And he said, are you guys going over? I said, yes, we are. And I said, I don't know if it's going to be 2 minutes or 20 minutes, but we're going over. And I said, I promise you that. And he goes, you do whatever you have to do. And I said, okay. So we're walking to the ring. We think it's 100% shoot. What else is there? I mean, literally, I ask anybody who says anything about it, what else was there? They don't give us, they tell us they're not going to do the finish, and they say, we'll see you in the ring. What are you going to do? They didn't give us an alternative. They didn't say, we don't want to do the finish. How about this? How about that? How about something else? They didn't say that. They said, we're not going to do the finish. And they're just looking at me and then walk out. I'm like, screw you, boys. One of us is losing badly. One of us is, I promise you, one of us is going to lose badly. It's either you or us. One of us is going to lose badly. So me and Ron walk to the ring. We expect an out-and-out fist fight. And we've gotten the green light from Gerald Brisco to do it. And not that we needed it. We didn't need it in either way. And we get in the ring, and we think these guys are going to want to fight us, and they didn't want to fight at all. They didn't want to fight one bit. They just we totally ate them up. It was not a Texas Tornado match. It was a regular tag match. We beat people have seen the tape. Watch it for yourself. We beat the living hell out of them. And finally, Brisco tells Corderas, who's the referee, he goes, Jimmy, you might ought to ring the bell at some point. Yeah, Gerald and Jimmy told us that later. There was no match. We just beat them up, and Jimmy Corderas had no idea why we did it. He just knows we're destroying these guys. Brisco knows, but he doesn't know how to get out of it because we're just beating them up. There's no finish anywhere. And so anyway, we leave them down. We go to walk out. Ron looks back and goes, they got up. So as soon as we left, they got up like they were going to wave to the crowd. We went back down again. That's what they edited out. We back down again and beat them up again. And then we come back, and I thought it was the most perplexing thing I've ever been a part of because they never fought back. I mean, it would have been 100% worse if they'd have fought back. One of us would have lost. They're tough enough to beat us up. They would have won, but one of us would have lost the fight. And we come to the back, thought, well, the fight's going to happen in the back. We waited by Gorilla for them. They walked through, thought, well, here it comes. They walked up to us, shook our hands, said, thanks, walked off, grabbed their bags and left. And so me and Ron are like, the hell just happened? So we go to the dressing room. We had so much heat. Everybody got up and left. So I'm sitting there with Ron. Ron looks at me and goes, you still got a connection in Japan? I said, I hope so. Because we just got our ass fired. And Ron starts laughing. And as I said that, Vince walks in. Well, shit, I called it. Here we go. We're fired. Vince walks by and just kind of looks at us, purposely being dramatic. He looks at us and he goes, hell of a match, boys. He slaps me on the shoulder and walks out. Well, somebody just told him. So once the boys found out what happened, it completely changed. And then I think they fired him within a week or something. They never came back after that.
Well, what did you ever speak to them again? Like, did you ever?
I would love. I hate that they passed away because I have no ill feelings toward them whatsoever. I don't know them. I know when they came in that day, I had a problem with it, but it was not going to be taken out in the ring. I promise you that. We did have a problem with it, but it was not going to be. We weren't going to do anything in the ring about it, you know. But I'd love to talk to them and ask them what they had planned and why they said no. And what they were going to do. I mean, I'd like to ask them what their thinking was about why they told us they're not going to do the finish and then walk to the ring and expect anything different.
I think they only had like 6 matches in the company. Is there an alternate universe you think where it could have worked, or is that just, hey, they started off on the bad foot with bad wrestler etiquette and that was all she wrote?
Well, I mean, that wasn't, yeah. They had heat, you know, when they walked in. They didn't, obviously, they didn't know any better. And, you know, whatever. You should. I'm not making excuses for them. They should. But as far as changing the finish, I don't know what else you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you recover from that, you know, especially if you're not looking forward to a fight or something. I don't know why they did it. And I don't know how they would recover from something like that. I don't know if they're that good or not because I never saw them work. You know, because we were working on the road the whole time, so I didn't see them work. I saw them doing their wave, you know, at the ECW crowd. You'd see on some videos and stuff, but I guess they were over. I don't know, which is why they brought them in. But I'd never seen them. I had no idea if they would have made it or not. I know they brought the Dudleys in right after that, and I think the Dudleys were kind of worried that, you know, hey, they're sticking us with APA too, which never crossed me and Ron's mind. We loved Bubba and Devon from the first moment we worked with them, but it never crossed our mind that another ECW tag teams come in. We never put the association together that one is tied to the other.
Do you think that at some point, I know that our topic's the Undertaker, we'll get back there in a minute. Do you think at certain points you and Ron Simmons became like, you know, we've heard before in the new generation era that when a new talent would come in, oftentimes they'd pair him up with Sean Waltman. And afterwards he would say, oh yeah, they got it. Or man, this guy's the shits. He was sort of the litmus test to see, you know, are they going to make it or not? Yeah. You think you and Ron were kind of used in that capacity for the WWE at one point?
Yeah, I know we were at times, and I don't know how often we were, you know, not to the level of the Undertaker or Sean. You know, Sean was such a great worker. They put him with everybody, and he was a huge litmus test for guys. You know, they knew Sean could work, and so they put him with guys that they didn't have a good match. They'd get fired because they knew it wasn't Sean. I remember when DDP and Canyon came in. I believe it was Canyon. He's working with our Mike Awesome. I can't remember if it's DDP or Mike Awesome or DDP and Canyon. Literally, they asked us, they said, would you work with them on the house show and let us know how it is? We're going to decide what we're going to do with them as far as the pay-per-view with Taker and Kane. So I know we actually got to ask, you know, and again, it's asked to see how good they are, not no policeman role. That never came up with me and Ron. But they did ask us to work with the guys and just give us feedback. And I'm sure they did that with a ton of different guys, but we did get a lot of guys that would come in and work with them. And that was kind of a barometer like they did with a lot of different guys.
I know you mentioned after the Public Enemy situation, Ron looked at you and said, you still got a connection in Japan. You got any fun Undertaker in Japan stories you can share with us?
Yeah, I do. I was in Japan with Undertaker, and I think we're in Budokan in Tokyo, and I broke my foot. And, you know, back then, if you break your foot, it's like, okay, we'll figure out how you can work. Now it's like you get sent home and you get like 6 months pay, which is great for the boys. But back then, you didn't get any of that shit that you get now. And so I broke my foot, and so Larry Hecht put a steel plate in the bottom of my boot so that my foot, like a cast, so my foot wouldn't move. So they don't say, hey, you got a broken foot, we're going to send you home. You got Taker tomorrow, so you got to have something so you can work. So they put this steel plate in the bottom of my boot so that my foot the broken bone wouldn't move too much is what they did. So the next night, Taker goes, you got a broken foot? I go, yeah. He says, well, let's do a no DQ match. Now, there was never the thought of, hey, shouldn't they send you home? That just didn't happen back then. Of course, Taker worked with more horrific injuries than I ever did. So it's kind of to be expected when the top guy does it. So I said, okay, fine. So I wasn't asking for anything else. I was just wanting to get through the match. So during the match, we had to do this fight through the crowd because I couldn't work. I had a freaking broken foot. I couldn't walk. And so at one point, I hit him with a cane, and he said, did you take that cane from that handicapped man? And I said, yes, I did. He goes, I love you.
My God, what a great.
There was some guy was sitting on a cane, and I thought, what else should I do? I'm gonna take a cane from a man that needs it and break it over Undertaker.
Oh my God. What's wrong with you guys? Andy said on Twitter, he says, was there one wrestler Undertaker saw something in when maybe the office didn't, and Taker ended up being right? Do you remember Undertaker advocating for a guy?
He always advocated for Godfather. He was right about him. Godfather had very successful different iterations, and now Godfather, goes to a event, and he's like Papa Shango, he's Kama, and he's Godfather. So he gets like 3 paydays out of it, which is great. But he advocated for a lot of guys. I mean, he was a guy that really stood up for guys. And when I say he was the litmus test, he didn't get guys fired. He wouldn't go back and say, that guy's the shit, get rid of him. He wouldn't do that. He would let Vince make his own decision. It was pretty clear. But what he would do is advocate for people. So he was, as far as I saw, he was never negative about anybody, but he would advocate for a lot of people.
Brad on Twitter wants to know what went into trying to make the Undertaker break character with your in-ring promo with him in the summer of 2004. This is a pretty famous deal. Everybody wants to make the Undertaker break character. And I have to imagine you were doing some of that, especially with the mini Undertaker and all that. Did you ever break him, or do you remember anyone else really breaking him on camera?
He gives me credit for getting us close, and I got him to smirk. I got him to break. I guess it technically break character, but when he smirked, it made me laugh, and I killed my own gimmick, and I wasn't able to follow up. I think I could have really got him if I hadn't seen him smirk and laugh, and it made me pop. The next thing you know, I'm getting choke slammed and tombstoned. But you got to understand how big a deal this was with the company. So when I had Undertaker at the last, after every, especially television show, to keep the crowd in the arena, I always obviously get choke slammed and tombstone at the end, but that's all they really want to see. So I get on the microphone and I do this, big thing, because both of us always had at least, not always, but nearly always had at least one match. So, they didn't want to put us out there in a 30-minute match. We did do that a few times, but for the most part, I go do a promo. I would get calls throughout the day, come see Vince, come see Kevin. And I would walk into Vince's office and it was like, I got something for you. And he'd give me a line to give Undertaker. He would shut down the whole company to give me a line to give Undertaker. And Kevin would do the same thing. He'd like, John, try this. The whole company would give me lines. I mean, guys would just come up to me randomly. Arn would come up to me. Agents would come up to me and go, try this. Everybody was trying to get him to break character, and it was a company-wide initiative, and I just happened to be the point guy that was out there. The time I got him was he had gone on a trip, and it was 110 degrees or something down in Texas, and he rented an RV, and the air conditioner went out, and he told a story, and it was a horrific story about he looked back, and his dog was just laying on the ground sweating. It was like a disaster. So when I get out there, I said something to the effect of, you got to turn that frown upside down. I said, you know what you need? You need a vacation. You need to get you an RV. You need to get you a dog. And he said he could see him start to laugh. And when I had him, it made me pop, and it killed the whole thing, because I think I could have got him to actually really break character. But I did get him to smirk and smile, and he gives me credit for being the one person that did get him at least a little.
I love hearing these old school Undertaker stories. And one of our questions we got on Twitter was, who could drink more? And I think the idea is, who was a more prolific drinker, you or the Undertaker? Who do you think, if you guys were going to have a drinking contest, who's last man standing?
Undertaker. I was a beer drinker. He was a whiskey drinker, and I can't drink whiskey. He could drink bottle after bottle of whiskey. He had a tolerance that was superhuman. He's a freaking Avenger level drinker. He and Godfather both. When I say they were the original APA, they were the original freaking APA. He is famous for carrying guys to their bed. At his retirement that we did, it was during COVID, Tim White, who's a legendary drinker on the Friendly Tap, passed out from a standing position. Like an oak tree, just fucking fell over. They got pictures of Midian on the ground with Henry Godwin trying to get him up. I mean, he put everybody almost in the grave that day.
That's amazing.
And the thing about it is, he could do that every single night. He could do it every night, get up the next morning like nothing's wrong, and go to work. I don't think I've ever seen anything like him. And Godfather was the same, by the way. That man, those two guys, legendary. I mean, absolutely legendary.
Another guy known for putting them away and getting up like nothing happened the next day, maybe tucking some guys in along the way, is our topic for next week's show when we'll be talking about John Cena. He's announced that 2025 is going to be his retirement year. He's going to do one last year with WWE, and we're going to be talking about him next week. I'm sure you've got Cena stories for days, John.
Oh, a ton of Cena stories. I love John. I've never been so happy for someone else's success like I have John Cena. He's just the most respectful, nice guy that I think I've ever met. I mean, just a wonderful guy. And by the way, he one time he's just to say thank you, which he does to everybody, by the way. People don't understand how good of a guy John Cena is. He says, hey, ride with me to the next town. I said, okay. So this was already started making movies. He's, big time everything now at this point. And just to say thanks, he wanted me to ride with him on his bus. And he goes, I got something special for you. And it was some type of flavored moonshine. It was the worst. Oh my God. It's like drinking Drano. Chimmel was there. And Chimmel's phone got lost up somebody's butt at one point. True story. And Chimmel unfortunately survived the trip. He's still alive, which is sad. But yeah, he literally, I got off and I don't remember anything once we got to the town. It was a heck of a good night. But Cena's got a tolerance. His first beer, he gave me credit, was with me on a golf course. At least one of the first ones. That's what he said. So I guess it's true.
Wow. I can't wait.
Yeah, he wouldn't. True story. I'll tell it next week, but true story. I said, hey, whoever doesn't have the longest drive has to down a beer. And that's what we used to do on the golf course, and Cena didn't drink. I didn't know that. I would have never had him drink. And he goes, okay. And he had a respect. He drank, and he did the same thing with Undertaker and whiskey. He never had a shot of whiskey, but out of respect, he wouldn't say no.
Oh, man, I can't wait for next week. If you've got questions for John about John Cena, ask us on social media. It's at Prichard Show on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram. And, of course, it's Something to Wrestle over on Facebook. But your home for all things Something to Wrestle is somethingtowrestle.com. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on the notifications bell so you won't miss the next time we're live. And speaking of live, we're going to be live this January at adfreeshows.com. It's called Top Guy Rumble. And a lot of your favorite wrestlers have been in the Von Braun Civic Center, whether it's WWE or WCW or TNA or AEW or even GCW. They've all been at the Von Braun Civic Center, and now you get your chance to step between the ropes at the VBC. Let's take a look.
Dreams become a reality for Ad-Free Show's Top Guy members this January, as Top Guy Rumble heads to the famous Von Braun Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Wrestling fans have witnessed so many memorable moments at the Von Braun Center, from Monday Night Raw, WCW Nitro, AEW Dynamite, and even the historical first big TNA show that launched the company. And this January, Top Guys will get to make history of their own as they step inside the ropes and learn what it feels like to be a wrestling superstar at Wrestling Fantasy Camp. And leading the class will be former WWE superstar Al Snow. Find out if you're tough enough to run the ropes with a man who helped train many future stars, including the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. And then it's time to put your booking hat on, as you'll get to help book and take part in our own private wrestling show, Top Guy Tussle. That's right, you have a chance to become a manager, ring announcer, timekeeper, referee, or even make a surprise run-in. And then kick back and watch the wrestling show that you helped book unfold. If that wasn't fun enough, on Saturday, February 1st, Top Guys will come together to watch the 2025 Royal Rumble, featuring the game event with Efren, for a chance to win some unbelievable prizes. Just last year, Top Guy David McClay took home $1,000 in cold hard cash. It is a weekend that a wrestling fan dreams about, and it becomes a reality this January for Ad-Free Show's Top Guy members. Become a Top Guy member and be a part of Top Guy Rumble 2025.
And believe it or not, you can still be a part of Top Guy Rumble by becoming an annual Top Guy member now. Make the jump to become an annual Top Guy member right now, and you'll get 2 months free with our Black Friday promotion. Come on, what are you waiting for? Sign up right now at adfreeshows.com. John, I never know what to expect when we sit down and click record, but we ran the gamut of emotions today, man. I appreciate you being honest and transparent and vulnerable. This was a fantastic episode, man. Thank you.
I don't think I've ever been called vulnerable before, so as far as emotional and all that stuff. But yeah, Conrad, it's so fun to work with you, and I love your friend Dave Silva, and of course our buddy Bruce Prichard. I'm sitting in his chair for a while and keeping it warm for me.
Well, if you can't get enough John, don't forget we will be here next week for John Cena. But in the meantime, he's got hundreds of episodes in the archives at Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. Find it on YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you enjoy podcasts. If you can't get enough John Bradshaw Layfield, by God, go check him out with Jerry Brisco. Two old pals talking about wrestling. And you guys have talked to, at this point, probably like a couple hundred legends. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I think I was talking to Jerry the other day, and I think we've got more legends that we've interviewed probably than anybody out there. I don't know how anybody could more. We've done it every single week for 3 or 4 years. And so we have so many legends. And the good part about it, Conrad, as you know, once they get comfortable, they're telling stories that the statute of limitations is out. It's when you're talking about guys that talk about 30, 40 years ago, they just say, oh, yeah, I was doing this. They're like, they would have never done that for 20 years. Nowadays they don't care. They just tell their life story. It's so fun talking to these guys. It's like being in the car or being in the bar with them. It's just a good time.
It's a great time. I highly recommend it. If you haven't tried it, what are you waiting for? Go check it out. Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. And stay tuned. Next week, we're going to be talking about John Cena right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.